Chapter 311. You also think it has something to do with that person? Loneman's eyes lit up. The demons obviously had a motive. And when they were in that small village, the only abnormal person was the one Shining met. The person that the God-fiend said had a providence skewed towards. The providence in this world was not fixed. It was rarely concentrated on one person, but the total amount did not change. In other words, if one person had more providence, it would be less relative to others. There were gains and there were losses. Shining said that she met the person who had providence skewed towards, and he had already left. And that night, the demons attacked the village. Then the immortal sect next to it, Green Robe sect, was also annihilated. They were so close that it was impossible not to think of them. Supremacy, what do you mean? Did you figure out the reason? Lu Hong was dumbfounded. Nothing. Lone Moon glanced at him and said, the demons should be looking for someone or something, so they attacked Green Robe's sect. Lu Hong nodded. Indeed, a small sect like Green Robe's sect was not worth the attention of a 10th level demon king. Unless they were looking for something. Oh yes, Junior Brother and I were in a secret room, and we found a few disciples who had just entered Green Robe's sect. Disciples? Loman's eyes turned cold. So, Lu Hong shuddered involuntarily. So we brought her back. You want to take them into the sect? Lone Moon laughed coldly. It was written all over his face that you were so poor that you couldn't even feed your own people. How dare you take in new disciples? Lu Hong broke out in a cold sweat. There are many talented ones among them. Lu Hong didn't dare to speak, mainly because he was poor. Ever since Supremacy Lone Moon came to Honesty Sect, in just a few months, the whole sect had changed. The spirit chi was rich, not to mention. The main thing was that the methods he taught to reorganize the sect were really useful. The pockets of the whole sect were instantly filled. Originally, he didn't feel it because he was used to being poor. But since he had spirit stones, every time he saw those people from top immortal sects, he didn't feel weak anymore, and his back straightened. In the past, it was already a great reward for every disciple in the sect to receive a Taoist robe. Now they could even carve an array on their Taoist robes. In the past, they had kept the magic tools and magic treasures that they did not dare to use easily. Now that they had spirit stones, they could throw them away after using them. This was something that he didn't even dare to think about in his hundreds of years of cultivation. But now it had all come true. And all of this was due to Supremacy Lone Moon's efforts. If not for the fact that Lone Moon was adamant in his opposition, coupled with the disdain that seeped out of his bones, he would have thrown away the position of the sect master. No, transferred it to him. As long as he was around, becoming a top-notch sect was just around the corner. The only bad thing was that Supremacy Lone Moon's temper was a little bad. His expression did not change, and he still looked like a top-notch supremacy. But every time his face darkened, he would feel a cold wind piercing into his bones, and he couldn't help but go weak in the knees. He felt that this was the majesty of an upper-level cultivator. In this world, perhaps only the venerable friend he brought could remain calm in front of him. Speaking of which, what was that supremacy's name again? He subconsciously looked to the side, at the woman who was already leisurely nibbling on a plate of fruits. Shinny? Shinyang? Aunt. Alright, that's not important. Supremacy, those are all half-grown children, they have nowhere to go. Lu Hong continued laughing. What's more, it's almost time for our sect to accept disciples. The elders of the sect are all waiting outside. Supremacy, why don't you come and take a look first? Lone Moon frowned, then nodded. Lu Hong gave a few instructions. In a short while, some core formation Dao lords, and the only two nascent soul cultivators in the sect, Lu Rue, entered one after another. Perhaps it was because Lone Moon had been forcing them to earn money these days. But after they greeted the few of them, they looked towards the door obediently, waiting for the disciples to enter. It was as if they were afraid that Lone Moon would talk to them about something. Lu Hong asked the disciples to bring the disciples over. In less than a quarter of an hour, they saw a group of children about 10 years old coming over from afar. There were dozens of them, some in green, some in blue and white disciple robes. Once they entered, they lined up in the main hall and bowed together. Then, They sized up the people in the hall with some curiosity, anxiety, and excitement. These were the group of children who had just gotten into a conflict in the disciples' hall. Jingqi was taller than his peers, so he stood at the back, feeling a little nervous. After coming to Honesty Sect, he realized that Green Robe's sect, which was like a paradise in his eyes, was only a low-class immortal sect. After Green Robe's sect was destroyed, and they were brought here by the sect master of Honesty Sect, he guessed that they were prepared to keep them, and with his qualifications, it wouldn't be a problem for him to join any sect. He had no objections to joining Honesty Sect, since they were all immortal cultivators. But after what happened with I Ching and the little fatty, he was a little hesitant. A gentleman does not stand under a collapsing wall. He only found out afterwards that the little fatty was the son of the sect master, and he had already offended him. Though he didn't feel regret, if he stayed here in the future, he would definitely seek revenge. Unless, he couldn't help but look up to the front. He heard that 2 soul formation supremacies came to Honesty Sect a few months ago. If he could join them, he wouldn't have to worry. He couldn't help but glance at the 2 people sitting at the top, but suddenly met a pair of slightly narrowed eyes. He got a shock and froze instantly, but the person sitting at the top tilted her head. Yo, it really was her. What's the matter? Lone Moon turned to look at Shening, who had suddenly spoken. He subconsciously followed her line of sight. Jingqi immediately lowered his head. His mind was in turmoil. That woman was clearly the one who ate at Wild Kid's house that day. She was actually a soul formation supremacy. His heart was in a mess. Before he could react, I Ching, who had just come in with him, suddenly walked out of the crowd. Under his and everyone's shocked gaze, he walked up to that woman and called out very naturally, "Master." Jingqi's eyes narrowed, and the resentment in his eyes almost overflowed. That was his master. What a wild little, no I Ching. No wonder he purposely drove him away that day. So he already knew that the person in the house was a soul formation supremacy, but just didn't want him to be chosen by a supremacy too. How scheming. Shining nodded. Thinking that he was still a child now, she handed him another fruit. Here. I Ching was stunned. He looked at the fruit in her hand and took it. His little brows frowned subconsciously, but he still replied, "Thank you, master." He already said that the fruit wasn't ripe. Chapter 312. Is your disciple's name tag ready? Lone Moon, who had already turned his gaze to Chef, asked casually. Yes. I Ching nodded and turned to stand beside Shening obediently. He had to hurry back to cook later. He could not let master eat this kind of unripe fruit again. Lu Hong looked at Lone Moon and suggested with a smile. Supremacy. Among the disciples that we brought back this time, there are indeed quite a number of disciples with good aptitudes. There's even a fire elemental heaven spirit root. One look and you can tell that he's a good seedling that's very suitable for sword cultivation. He immediately began to recommend, implying that Lone Moon should also accept a disciple. Aren't we a sword cultivation sect? Lone Moon was not moved at all. He picked up the teacup beside him and said, Sword cultivation is the heart of the sword. The understanding of sword techniques has little to do with spirit roots. Besides, the difference between spirit roots is only the amount of spirit chi absorbed. We don't lack spirit chi here. Yes. Lu Hong's mouth twitched. You have money, whatever you say is right. After thinking for a while, he did not give up and said, This disciple's ability to understand is not bad, and he is also smart. I heard from the surviving disciples of Green Robe's sect that he was the one who let everyone hide in that secret room, so that these disciples could escape. Oh, Lone Moon raised his eyebrows. Seeing that he was interested, Lu Hong continued. Supremacy's sect is empty. You don't see any disciples. Even Shen. Supremacy Shen already has a disciple. Why don't Supremacy also accept one, so that you can pass on your mantle? Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Who said he was empty? There were still more than 200 disciples in the invincible heavenly palace in the immortal world. Which one of them was not taught by him? If not for shunning this cheat, would they be able to cultivate crooked? Could they? Even now, I Ching said that he was Shen Ying's disciple, but in the end, he was still the one who taught them. Seeing that he did not reply for a long time, Lu Hong thought that he had admitted it. He quickly looked up at the group of little radishes in front of him and waved at Jing Qi, who he had met once at the back. "Come, child, come to the front, let's supremacy see." The children were stunned and turned around curiously. Jing Qi was overjoyed and clenched his fists. Thank goodness. There were 2 supremacies in Honesty sect. If he joined the other sect, he would not be any worse than I Ching. He suppressed his excitement and took a step to the side. Only then did he pass the crowd and walk forward. Only then did Lone Moon look up. Then, puff! He was so shocked by the scene in front of him that he spat out a mouthful of tea and instantly stood up from his chair. F***CK. What the hell was this? Shen Ying's exclamation of surprise echoed in his mind. He turned and glared at the person beside him. You freaking knew. It's not that early. Shen Ying tilted her head. 2 minutes ago. F***CK. Would it kill you to remind me? I don't think so. Say that again. He said word by word, his face filled with the words food expenses. I just reminded you. You were obviously looking at Chef and didn't realize it. Mother ***. Lone Moon had an urge to tear her apart. Supremacy? Lu Hong, who was at the side, was dumbfounded. Why did they suddenly quarrel? Should he stop them? What's wrong? Is there a problem with this child? The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. He glanced at Jing Qi below, and then sat back down. No problem. In the eyes of others, there was indeed no problem. After all, it was just a 10-year-old child. However, in his eyes, this 10-year-old child, who was not even as tall as his waist, was shrouded in a shadow. It was as if he was wearing a transparent humanoid costume, and the 2 figures were stacked together. The key thing was that the shadow was a fatty, the kind that was as fat as a ball. He could even see the 4 or 5 layers of his belly glistening with oil. It hung straight down and just happened to cover a certain indescribable part. That was right. It was a naked fatty. His fat face made the same expression as the child in his body. Perhaps because of the contrast, it looked even greasier. The key thing was that in the shadow's fat, there were balls of familiar aura. It was the providence of the god fiend that suddenly tilted and disappeared. However, none of this counted for much. What was more important was that the moment he saw him, the 3 bright red words that suddenly appeared in his mind were enough to blind him. Intruder. Holy shit. He had an urge to curse. It was obvious that the person in front of him was the result of the previous plane warning. This was an invader who transmigrated from another plane. As a newbie, Lone Moon really did not know how to deal with the so-called plane crisis. And the other party did not seem to know what they looked like. This was different from any plane invasion that Shen Jing casually mentioned. He turned to look at Shen Ying. Seeing that she did not look like she was going to deal with it immediately, he could only bear with it for now. Supremacy, what do you think of this child? Lu Hong wanted to say a few more words of praise. Lu Tao suddenly rushed in, his face anxious. Dad. Not good. Tao air. Lu Hong reprimanded. Why are you so flustered? Dad. Lu Tao remembered his purpose and said anxiously. Not good. Little junior brother suddenly started to vomit blood. The uncle master in the medicine hall said that he needs qi nourishing pills to recover. Jishu. Lu Hong frowned. Speak slowly. How did he get injured? And how did his meridians get injured? And he needed qi nourishing pills? Lu Tao was stunned. He turned to point at Jing Qi behind him. He got injured in a fight with him. I thought he just fainted. I didn't expect it to be so serious. With that said, he recounted what happened in front of the disciples' hall. Jing Qi's expression turned cold. A murderous look rose in his eyes. This fatty was despicable indeed. He must have deliberately chosen this time to complain. Nonsense. Lu Hong's expression darkened. He glared at him. No matter what the reason is, disciples of the sect are not allowed to fight in private. No matter how big the matter is, the uncle masters will deal with it. He turned to look at Jing Qi in front of him. You are the same. Although you are not a disciple of the sect, you are not allowed to hurt others. He reprimanded both sides, treating it as a child's play. However, he admired Jing Qi from the bottom of his heart. After all, A third-level qi refinement could defeat a fifth-level qi refinement. It was enough to show that Jing Qi's talent was extraordinary. However, the other party clearly did not think so. Jing Qi's expression darkened. His entire body exuded a gloomy aura. They were indeed father and son. One went back on his words. He said that he would not pursue the matter, but he ran in to complain. The other was even more biased. He subconsciously looked at the supremacy, who was full of immortal qi. He could not help but feel a little expectant. He hoped that he was different from the others. He could see through the appearance and say something fair. However, after waiting for a while, the person did not say anything. He seemed to be thinking about something. Lu Hong took out a bottle of qi-nourishing pills and gave it to Lu Tao. Chapter 313. Give it to your junior brother. Let him receive his punishment after he recovers. With that said, he looked at Jing Qi and added, You too, go receive your punishment later. Thank you, father. Lu Tao was delighted. Perhaps he was thinking about his junior brother. He ran out quickly, not even looking at Jing Qi who was beside him. Instead, Jing Qi's hands tightened, the resentment in his heart grew. They were all punished, only Lu Tao was fine. He was indeed biased. Supremacy. After dealing with this little episode, Lu Hong looked at Lone Moon, still unable to resist persuading him to accept a disciple. Look at this child. After the complaint just now, Jing Qi was both nervous and expectant. A soul formation supremacy should be different. In the next moment, he heard the other say a few words. I don't accept disciples. With that, Jing Qi's heart turned cold. The expectant expression on his face instantly darkened. A wave of anger immediately surged up. What soul formation supremacy, this group of people were indeed the same. To think that he still had a bit of expectation. Lu Hong was stunned. Supremacy? Why don't you reconsider? After all, a heaven spirit root is rare. Moreover, it was a fire spirit root. No need. I have no intention of accepting disciples today anyway. And sword cultivators do not value spirit roots. No matter how talented a spirit root is, in my eyes, it is the same as the 5 spirit roots. Lone Moon continued. Sword cultivators value temperament more. Any kind of spirit root is fine for a good temperament. Moreover, having I Ching as a disciple on my mountain is enough. The others are just trouble. He still had to take care of food, and besides, who could compare to I Ching's special physique? Seeing this, Lu Hong did not continue persuading. Sigh, alright, if that's the case then. Don't look down on me. Before he finished speaking, Jing Qi, who was below, looked like he could not help but look angry and humiliated. He raised his head and glared at Lone Moon. If you don't like me, just say it. What temperament? You don't have to mock me openly and implicitly. Aren't you just biased towards that little fatty? That's why you don't accept me? As soon as he said this, not only Lone Moon, but everyone present was shocked by this young man who suddenly looked angry. What was this? Don't think that I can't tell. But he still looked as if he had seen through the truth. He pointed at the crowd and said, You people from Honesty Sect are all birds of a feather. You can't tell right from wrong, and only know how to protect your own people. Our Green Robes sect has been exterminated, but at least we still have a backbone, and we can't be humiliated by others. Don't look down on us. Impudent, Lu Hong finally reacted. Was he feeling resentful because of a single rejection? If it was already like this now, then what would happen after he cultivated it? Instantly, his good impression of Jing Qi fell to the bottom. Initially, he was thinking that if the supremacy did not want it, it would not be a bad idea for him and his junior brother to take in such a good spiritual route. However, from the looks of it now, the Venerable One was right. The spiritual route was secondary. The most important thing was one's temperament. What? Are you angry because I've hit the mark? Old fool. Jing Qi still looked like he was not afraid of power. He even looked at Shin Ying and Lone Moon provocatively and snorted. So what if he was a venerable? This young master doesn't care. Even without you, I will stand at a higher position than you one day. It was getting more and more ridiculous. Lu Hong was so angry that his beard blew up. That was really embarrassing. He He was the one who thought the most of this kid. Now that he made such a scene, it was like slapping him in the face in front of everyone. So young, and yet you have such a big mouth. But he was still a kid after all, and he could not punish him too harshly. He directly called 2 disciples in, lock him in the forbidden room at the back of the mountain, and let him reflect on his mistakes. Yes, the 2 disciples immediately went forward to pull him, but Jingqi directly pushed them away, and even took out his spirit sword. Do you still want to kill him to silence him? The corner of Lu Hong's mouth twitched. Such a young kid, where did these dark thoughts come from? He sighed, and did not want to talk more with him. He directly conjured a seal to fix him on the spot, and then waved his hand to let the disciples take him away. Not to mention taking him in as a disciple, he had to consider whether to take him into the sect now. After all, it looked like his brain was not working well. Jingqi was only at Qi refinement, and naturally could not resist a nascent soul cultivator. Seeing that he was about to be dragged away, he had no choice but to glare fiercely at the people present, and shouted out a classic line word by word. The river flows east for 30 years, and then west for 30 years. Do not bully the young because he is poor. Lone Moon. Everyone. Instantly, everyone in the hall looked at the person who walked out with a look of concern and concern for the mentally retarded. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. Was he crazy? And what the hell was this familiar line? An invader with so many lines. Did he really think he was the protagonist of a transmigration? And he did not say anything just now, right? He just did not want to take in a disciple. What the hell was with his expression, as if the whole world had let him down? Did this person transmigrate from the plane of the mentally retarded? Lu Hong also looked so ashamed that he wanted to die. He glanced at Lone Moon weakly, and hurriedly changed the topic. The matter of choosing a disciple, let's talk about it later. Let's investigate the matter of Green Robe's sect first. He coughed, and then looked at the remaining disciples in green robes in the hall. Do any of you know why those demons attacked the Green Robe sect? The children looked at each other for a while, and a hint of fear and hesitation flashed across their eyes. Lu Hong hurriedly smiled and comforted them. Don't be afraid. Since you have come to Honesty Sect, you are disciples of our sect from now on. No matter what happens, the sect will protect you. Just tell me what you heard and saw before you came here. Only then did the children's expressions soften a little. They looked at the person in front of them, and began to speak one after another. We saw a lot of man-eating demons. They ate a lot of senior brothers. Good, there are senior sisters. You said that senior sisters' meat is more delicious. They lost a lot of blood, so the sect master asked us to hide, or we would be eaten too. The sect master also said not to let us make a sound. If we can't find green feather. Green feather. Orchid? Green feather spiritual orchid. Those demons are looking for you, Tianlan? Lu Hong exclaimed, and his eyes widened suddenly, seeing the children nodding one after another. He hurriedly turned to Lone Moon and said, Supremacy, it seems that these demons are going for the green feather spiritual orchid. He said seriously, the green feather spiritual orchid is not only a holy medicine for healing, but also has the effect of cleansing the spirit and meridians. I heard that it can also be used to refine nascent formation pills, and eating it can increase the chances of forming a nascent soul by 30%. It's just that this green feather spiritual orchid only appears once every 10,000 years, and has always been rare. Lu Hong sighed. Green Robe's sect actually has such a treasure. Lone Moon frowned. The demon monarch was already at the 10th level, and nascent formation pills had no effect on him at all. Why did he snatch this thing? And he didn't hesitate to exterminate the whole sect, unless this thing originally belonged to him. Chapter 3:14. For some reason, he felt that this matter might have something to do with that retarded, oh no, the invader. But he didn't expect the 3 azure realms to be so poor now. Even the green feather spiritual orchid was a treasure that everyone fought for. He remembered that most of the radishes that Rabbit gave Shaning every day were of this type. Occasionally, 1 or 2 such weeds would grow in the back mountain of Invincible Sect. He was thinking about the invader. After figuring out the demon's motive, he wasn't very interested in what happened next. After bidding farewell to Lu Hong, he pulled Shen Ying and I Ching back to Invincible Peak. How do you plan to deal with that Chinibyu? Once they reached the peak, Lo Moon asked directly. Open the plane door and chase him back? I can't. Shen Ying shrugged. What do you mean? How could there be someone in this world that you can't chase away? He looked suspicious. Shen Ying picked up a fruit out of habit. Just as she was about to eat it, I Ching suddenly snatched it from her and handed her a pastry. She paused and stuffed it directly into her mouth. He's mixed. Lo Moon paused. He suddenly thought of the fat shadow that wrapped around him. You mean the providence on him? That was the providence that belonged to this world. If they threw him back to his original plane now, it would indeed affect it. No. Shen Ying tilted her head. Providence is just some data. If it's missing, we can just add it. There was no difference. Lo Moon's mouth twitched. You're insulting all the children of Providence in novels. The point is the person who mixed. Person? Lo Moon paused. His eyes widened. You mean his current body? Indeed, in their eyes, Jingqi was a fatty who had invaded their world. To outsiders, he was just a 10-year-old child. It was obvious that the fatty was the true body of the invader, which meant that the other party was a soul transmigrator. You're not going to say that the unlucky ghost that he possessed is still in his body, are you? Yes. Shen Ying nodded. Holy shit. Lo Moon cursed. Indeed, he couldn't just kick him back like that, because he would kick two people at once. By then, it would be their people invading another plane. That's not right. He suddenly thought of something. Logically speaking, a body can only contain one soul. If his soul was possessed, the original soul should have been squeezed out. The system is incompatible. I'm trapped, Shen Ying said. You mean to say that the original soul was trapped in the invader's body like the karma? Lo Moon suddenly thought of the karma that was trapped in the body of the Chinibyu. How could this be? Could it be that the invader's soul was stronger than the others? Shen Ying lowered her head and thought for a moment before replying. Maybe he's whiter. White. The corner of Lo Moon's mouth twitched. He thought about the layers of fat on the illusory figure. You're saying that because he was too fat, the soul and the karma in his original body were trapped and could not come out? Yeah. Right, your sister. Since when was being fat a superpower? Hey, don't casually add a sense of existence to being fat. Then what do we do now? Are we going to let him stay here forever? With his belly full of karma, he might really become the male lead in the future. What about the original soul? We can't just let him stay here, can we? This was the first plane mission. Did they have to start with a high difficulty? Let's wait for him to exhaust. Exhaust? You mean we should exhaust his karma first? Lo Moon hesitated. He thought about it carefully. Indeed, the reason why the invader could trap the soul was more or less because of the karma. He had too much karma on him. Naturally, he would suppress others. Of course, the native soul could not resist him. The two of them were originally fused together. They could not casually separate them. After all, he was from another plane. The soul system was different. There might be some problems when they separated. But if the karma disappeared, the native soul would naturally instinctively resist. There would be problems when the two of them fused together. Then it would be much easier to attack. But he thought of another problem. Karma is not something that can be easily exhausted. He had amazing karma in the first place. Others could not exhaust his karma at all, unless he met someone with the same karma, or an opponent that he acknowledged himself and made him want to fight. Then it would be effective. We can't possibly create another cheat just for him. There is. Shen Ying suddenly turned to look at the kitchen. Chef. Lo Moon hesitated. He glanced at a certain little figure who was cooking on a chair, very serious. This was really a wise choice. Chef, come. Let's discuss how to slap his face. In order to exhaust a person's karma, one had to strike him when he was at his most complacent, so that he could not be satisfied. That way, he would want more and keep exhausting his own karma. The person who struck him down had to be the one who could make him want to compete with himself. And Chef was undoubtedly the best candidate. First of all, he came from the same village as the invader. They seemed to have the same starting point. Second, Chef was originally a dragon. He was destined to become a god. Even if the other party's karma was heaven-defying, he still needed to cultivate by himself. But Chef only lacks spirit chi. He could grow even with his eyes closed. In terms of speed, no one could be faster than him. Third, regarding the influence of karma, in theory, if that Jing Qi was lucky, a portion of people would be unlucky. This was the influence of karma, but Chef was a plain assistant. Although he could not completely bear the assistant seal because of his body, that seal was in his body. With this seal, all the rules in this world could not restrict him, including karma. That meant there was no need to worry at all that he would be affected by the invader's domineering aura. Finally, for some reason, that Jing Qi indeed seemed to have an inexplicable enmity towards Chef. He had already sensed it in the main hall earlier. Chef did not need to do anything at all to attract 100% of the other party's enmity. Lone Moon was just thinking about whether to let Chef go into seclusion and build his foundation before anything else, when something suddenly happened in Honesty Sect. The protective mountain array was activated instantly. The entire sect shook, as if someone was attacking the array. In the next moment, a series of demonic roars came from not far away. Demonic chi suddenly surged outside the mountain gate. Large amounts of black chi headed straight for the sect. Supremacy! A disciple hurried over with a horrified look on his face. A lot of demons suddenly appeared outside the mountain gate and surrounded the mountain gate. Sect Master asked me to invite Supremacy over. They really came. Chapter 315. Got it. Lone Moon nodded. They came pretty fast. He turned back and said to Shining, "Don't run around." With that said, he disappeared in a flash. At this time, the mountain gate was already surrounded by a dense crowd of demons. There were demons of all races, and most of them were 7th level or 8th level demons. There were even a few 9th level ones. If not for the protective mountain array being opened, they might have already rushed up the mountain. Lu Hong tried hard to maintain the protective mountain array, while leading the disciples to watch the demons who were ready to make trouble. Though he knew that demons were cruel and vengeful by nature, he didn't expect them to not even let off a few children, and even chase them all the way here. Old man, if you know what's good for you, hurry up and open the array, and we can still let off a few of your disciples. Otherwise, a wolf demon walked out and bared his bloody teeth at the crowd. When we rush in, we'll eat you up until not even your bones are left. How dare you, demon? Lu Hong snorted. You shouldn't eat humans in the first place. You even destroyed Green Robe's sect, and now you dare to come to my Honesty Sect. Aren't you afraid of karma entangling you and destroying 1,000 years of cultivation? Pooey. That wolf demon looked disdainful. Don't give me that. Only you humans believe in karma. We are demons in the first place. If we don't eat humans, are we supposed to eat porridge and rice? As soon as he finished speaking, all the demons laughed loudly, looking at the crowd as if they were looking at dishes. Besides, you stole our king's spirit herb first. We're just here to seek justice. The wolf demon continued. Eating a few people is already letting you off easy. If you don't hand over the green feather spiritual orchid you stole, we'll eat all the mortals around here too. Green feather spiritual orchid? Lu Hong was stunned. We've never seen any green feather spiritual orchid. Don't slander us. You humans are the best at lying. You dare to do it, but don't dare to admit it. The wolf demon snorted. Do you dare to say that it wasn't you who saved those brats from Green Robe's sect? We turned the whole Green Robe's sect upside down, and couldn't find that green feather spiritual orchid. It must be you who took it. We did save those children, because we couldn't bear to see them die in the demon's mouth. Lu Hong said solemnly. But we have never seen the green feather spiritual orchid, whether you believe it or not. You still dare to quibble? Let's see how long you can last. The jackal demon seemed to be too lazy to talk to him. With a wave of his hand, the demons beside him rushed forward and began to attack the mountain guarding array. For a moment, there were only a few loud bangs, and the entire sect shook. However, the array formation still did not break. Instead, some of the weaker demons were directly bounced away. Get out of the way! Suddenly, a wolf's howl came from the group of demons, startling all the demons and making a path. Not long after, a person walked over. Compared to the rest of the demons who were still in their beast forms, he was in a complete human form. He wore a long black robe, and his whole body was filled with a shocking demonic aura. He was completely different from the others. Lu Hong's heart sank. This was the 10th level demon king. A bunch of trash. You can't even break an array formation. The demon monarch glanced coldly at all the demons, causing them to tremble. Only then did he look at the cultivators in front of him with a pair of blood-red eyes. A red light flashed in his hand, and a sinister smile appeared on his face. Since you don't intend to return the treasure, it'll be the same after you eat all of them. With that said, his figure flashed, and he immediately leaped more than 100 feet, attacking the mountain guarding array with his palm. There was a flash of lightning, and the previously unbreakable array suddenly shook a few times. With a clang, it cracked like broken glass and directly dissipated. Lu Hong, who was maintaining the array formation, felt the blood in his chest churning. His body was unstable, and he directly took a few steps back. However, the Demon King opened his eyes and stared at Lu Hong. "I'll start with you." With that said, he roared and flew up, pouncing directly at Lu Hong. Just as his pair of sharp claws were about to pierce through the other party, suddenly a beam of sword chi fell from the sky, directly hitting the Demon King in the air. A white figure instantly appeared, waved the flute in his hand, and with a thud, the Demon King was knocked down from the sky. With a bang, the Demon King did not even have time to squeak before directly smashing onto the ground. The demon chi on his body dissipated by more than half, and instantly, he was beaten back to his original form. Lone Moon stepped on the huge wolf demon that had changed back to its original form. He frowned, as if he did not dare to believe it. He asked, "This is the Demon King?" The little animals of this generation were not good, much weaker than the rabbit of the past. Perhaps because the look of disdain on his face was too obvious, the people and demons present all fell silent, with a dumbfounded expression on their faces. It felt like before it started, it was already over. Soul formation cultivation. Nobody knew which demon was the first to scream. Instantly, the whole group of demons seemed to be in an uproar. They turned and began to flee. Not the slightest bit of intention to save the Demon King. Not the slightest bit of love for their own kind. "Don't you not believe in karma? Then I'll show you what karma is." Lone Moon snorted coldly. It was not easy for him to act tough, so he had to continue. He changed his hand, and an incantation was formed instantly. Instantly, a sky full of swords appeared, directly attacking the fleeing demons below. Before they could even take a few steps, they were caught up by the spirit swords and turned into a sea of blood. For a moment, the whole Honesty sect was filled with the cries of all kinds of demons. Just that previously it was a threatening roar, but this time it was a wail of death. In less than 10 minutes, there was total silence. A large number of 7th and 8th level demons died, leaving only a few small demons who were not stained with the smell of blood, but most of them were 4th and 5th level. The people of Honesty sect who were ready to fight to the death. What did they come here for? Lone Moon made a rebirth incantation, sending all these bloody demons, who looked like they had eaten many humans, to the river of forgetfulness. Then he turned back. "Where do you want to run to?" The Wolf King, who had just crawled 2 steps, suddenly stiffened. All the hair on his body stood up in shock, and he lay on the ground trembling. "Supremacy, spare me. I didn't know that there were soul formation supremacies here. Didn't they say that the highest cultivation level here was at nascent soul?" Sure enough, rumors were not to be trusted. "Oh, you mean that if there were no soul formation supremacies, you would dare to come and eat people?" Lone Moon's eyes turned cold. The Wolf King's eyes narrowed, and he trembled even more. No supremacy, I had no choice. The green feather spiritual orchid that I had been raising for thousands of years was stolen by them. In a fit of anger, Who said they stole your green feather spiritual orchid? Who cares about your radish? And a green radish? Yes, it's true. The Wolf King's ears drooped down, feeling wronged. I know that kid, he was the one who stole it. As he spoke, he pulled out an image recording stone from somewhere. Suddenly, a phantom image popped out. It was a child around 10 years old. He was thin and tall, and he was holding a green radish that was overflowing with spiritual energy. Chapter 316. This is that Jingqi. Lu Hong instantly recognized the person on top. He's the one who stole it. The Wolf King continued. We couldn't find him in Green Robe's sect, and only found out later that this kid was saved by Honesty sect. That's why, if he had known that there was a soul formation cultivator here, and a sword cultivator at that, he wouldn't have come. Lone Moon frowned. Actually, he had more or less guessed that this might be related to that intruder, but he didn't expect it to really be him. No wonder so many demons appeared in that village first, then Green Robe's sect, and now Honesty sect. So they were only after Jingqi, but Jingqi clearly knew that these demons were attracted by him. But why didn't he mention this? And he didn't feel guilty at all, and was unbelievably self-righteous. This couldn't be explained with other kids, not to mention that he wasn't one at all. Lu Hong's face darkened, and he turned to instruct. Go to the back mountain and bring Jingqi from Green Robe's sect here. Yes. The disciple immediately turned and flew away. The Wolf King's eyes lit up, and a glimmer of hope flashed across his eyes. Lone Moon didn't intend to let him go just like that. Even if you have a reason, you destroyed Green Robe's sect and ate so many people. Just these 2 points alone, I can't let you go. The Wolf King became listless again, and trembled even more violently. A spell was about to form. Supremacy, wait. Lu Hong seemed to have thought of something, and said, This Wolf King is very sinful, and Honesty sect just happens to lack a mountain guard beast. Why don't we let it stay in the sect forever, as atonement? The Wolf King nodded immediately. I'm willing. Supremacy, please spare my life. I love guarding the gate, very much woof woof. Lone Moon. Lu Hong. Woof your ass, do you think you're a dog? Since Sect Master says so, then so be it. Lone Moon made a spell, and pointed at the Wolf King's forehead, directly pulling out a trace of his divine perception and heart blood. He turned to Lu Hong and said, Give me your hand. Lu Hong subconsciously reached out, and Lone Moon directly turned his hand, and a blood-colored wolf head symbol appeared on Lu Hong's wrist. This is a blood contract. N. Lone Moon nodded. If he disobeyed or dared to eat humans in the future, Lone Moon could just activate this seal to kill him. Demons were different from demonic beasts. They could not be contracted, so this method was the safest. The Wolf King lowered his head even more and repeatedly promised, This little demon wouldn't dare. After it finished speaking, it immediately climbed up to the stone platform at the entrance of the mountain, and sat down with its hind paws on the ground. A huge tail wagged behind it, as if it was convulsing. It had completely forgotten that it was originally a demon king. Lone Moon. Lu Hong. Everyone. At least he was tactful. The rest of the lesser demons don't have any blood chi on them, so they probably haven't hurt anyone. Deal with it as you see fit. Lone Moon instructed. Suddenly he thought of something. Oh yes. Clean up the corpses, and send them to Shen Ying on the Invincible Peak, after extracting their demon cores. Although they're a little broken, they should still be edible. Eat. Did they hear it wrong? Yes. Lone Moon glanced at the remaining lesser demons and the Wolf King. He said word by word. Don't they like to eat humans? Let them understand what it means to be at the top of the food chain and fear. Everyone. Demon. All the demons trembled. So scary. They actually want to eat demon corpses. Before the crowd demons could react, the disciple who had just left to call for reinforcements suddenly ran back with an anxious expression. Sect Master, bad news. That disciple called Jingqi is missing. What? Lu Hong's expression darkened. Isn't he in confinement? How can he be missing? Have you checked the disciple's movements? I've checked. No one saw him leave. I went to the confinement room and found that he was not there. This child. A trace of anxiety flashed across Lu Hong's face. Could something have happened to him? Suddenly he thought of something. Everyone immediately turned to look at a certain dog king. No, Wolf King. The Wolf King's hair stood on end. No, it wasn't me. Don't wrongly accuse a good wolf. We didn't even enter the mountain gate. How can we capture him? Besides, we didn't even find the green feather's spiritual orchid. Supremacy. What do you think? Lu Hong looked at Lone Moon awkwardly. Lone Moon frowned. This matter could have been caused by that Chinibyu. After all, those with Chinibyu always had inexplicable paranoia. Let's go back to the sect first. Lu Hong nodded. Only then did everyone suppress the lesser demons and fly back to the main peak. Lu Hong walked at the front and was about to enter the hall. Suddenly, a soul formation suppressive force came from inside. He did not notice it and took a step back. That suppressive force became even heavier. It even swept towards everyone unscrupulously, obviously with a murderous intent. Loman's expression turned cold. Did they think he was dead? Instantly, the suppressive force belonging to a sword cultivator counterattacked. It rushed mercilessly into the hall. It attacked the cultivator sitting on the high seat. Instantly, there was a series of messy movements of tables and chairs, as if they were not sitting properly. Only then did Lone Moon lead everyone in. He looked at the middle-aged cultivator who came uninvited and was still sitting on the high seat. Honesty Sect actually has a soul formation sword cultivator. I have underestimated you. The cultivator on the high seat stood up and looked at Lone Moon, who was at the front with some wariness. You are Supremacy Wu Xiang of Divine Heaven's Sect. Lu Hong was shocked and instantly recognized the identity of the person. Divine Heaven's Sect was the #1 immortal sect in the Upper Azure world. There were tens of thousands of disciples in the sect. It was completely different from Honesty Sect. There were more than 10 soul formation supremacies in the sect, and this supremacy Wu Xiang was one of the strongest among them. It was rumored that he was already half a step into immortality. It seems that this old man's face is somewhat pleasing to the eye. The other party smiled, but his eyes were still somewhat arrogant. Lu Hong frowned. I wonder why supremacy has come to Honesty Sect, and he attacked indiscriminately. If not for Supremacy Loman's presence, even he would have been injured. I'm not here for anything else. I'm here for my new disciple. Wu Xiang glanced at him. Perhaps because of Loman's presence, he said in a low voice. This old man has taken in a new disciple. His name is Jingqi. A few days ago, he had been here for some time. I had already taken him away just now, but I remembered that I did not inform you, so I specially came back. Jingqi. Lu Hong's expression darkened. No wonder he suddenly disappeared. It turned out that he was taken away by him. He did not expect that a child like him would know Supremacy Wu Xiang. That's right. He is my only direct disciple from now on. His eyes turned cold, and he continued in an accusatory tone. I have cultivated for so many years and only have this one disciple. It is inevitable that I will be a little protective. Apart from informing your sect, I have another thing to ask you this time. Chapter 317. Lu Hong's heart sank, and he had a bad premonition. What is it? My disciple is straightforward and lively, but he is also a pure and kind person. May I ask, Sect Master, what did he do wrong? You wanted to lock my disciple in a secret room where he can't see the light of day, and you wanted to kill him. His voice deepened, and the coercion from his body began to sweep towards Lu Hong. Lu Hong's face paled, and the coercion was about to sweep over him. Lone Moon suddenly took a step forward and pulled him behind him. They were both soul formation cultivators, but an even colder coercion was directly pressed back. Wu Xiang was stunned and took another step back, almost tripping on the chair behind him. His face was instantly filled with shock. Just now he thought that it was because he was not prepared that he was pushed back. Now it seemed that this person's strength was not inferior to his at all. He clearly looked like he was only in the middle stage of soul formation. But why was his coercion so shocking? Could it be that this was a sword cultivator? Supremacy's words are really interesting. Lone Moon gave him a businesslike smile. That child called Jingqi was originally a surviving disciple of Qingyi sect. He made a mistake, hurt others and disrespected his elders, which was why he was punished with confinement. And he was confined for less than a day. Where did this saying of killing him come from? Are you saying that my disciple lied? I don't know whether he lied or not. Lone Moon continued. But if Sect Master really wanted to kill him, Why did you save him from Qingyi's sect in the first place? We are not that free. His expression changed, but he still argued. Even if he did make a mistake, there is no need to punish him so heavily, right? Besides, he is my disciple. It is not your turn to punish him, right? This is even more laughable. Lone Moon gave him a sarcastic smile without hesitation. May I ask this supremacy, what is considered a light punishment? Just a day of confinement, is that considered heavy for a cultivator? Then I have to ask your sect. Divine Heaven sect, right? How do you punish your disciples? Let my sect learn from you? He was speechless, because confinement was indeed not a heavy punishment. Also, we don't have the ability to predict the future. We didn't know beforehand that he would become your disciple. Lone Moon continued. If supremacy really treasures his disciples so much, I suggest that you write the words formless disciple on his forehead in the future. That way, it'll be easier for others to identify him. Hearing the sarcasm in his words, Wu Xiang was furious, but he couldn't find any words to refute. He could only try his best to suppress the anger in his heart. Gritting his teeth, he snorted coldly and said, "All right, let's end this matter. I won't pursue it further. From now on, Jingqi has nothing to do with your honesty sect." After saying that, she glared at him and turned around to leave. Wait. Lone Moon suddenly spoke. We've finished talking about supremacy. We haven't even started talking about our business yet. Wu Xiang paused, turned around and said, "What else do you want?" Lone Moon's smile was like a spring breeze. I think what supremacy said makes sense. Whoever's disciple will naturally be in charge. I believe that the Venerable One is not someone who cannot distinguish right from wrong. Am I right? He frowned and glanced at him with an inexplicable expression. What a coincidence. My sect has just taken in a small animal. Oh, it's a mountain guarding beast. And the green feather spiritual orchid that this mountain guarding beast has been raising for 1,000 years is lost. It's your disciple who accidentally took it away. Since Master is here, he should be able to help him. Can you return it to us now? After saying that, he reached out his hand without hesitation. Wu Xiang's eyes widened abruptly, and he blurted out, "The green feather spiritual orchid is yours?" It seems that supremacy has seen it before. Lone Moon's smile deepened. The other froze for a moment, and some anger flashed across his face. But he still gritted his teeth and said, "A few days ago, I was slightly injured. My disciple has already used the green feather spiritual orchid to heal me." Oh. Lone Moon looked like he understood, and even deliberately dragged out the sarcastic tone. The other's face darkened even more. "I don't have it on me now. When I return to Divine Heaven's sect, I'll get a new one and return it to you." After saying that, he added, "I always keep my promises. I'll definitely return it to you." We naturally believe supremacy's words. Lone Moon nodded. Since that's the case, we won't pursue this matter any further. Let's pursue something else first. What else do you want? Wu Xiang looked like he wanted to kill him, but he couldn't do anything, because he was in the wrong. Although this green feather spiritual orchid belongs to my mountain guarding beast, he used to be a demon king. Because the spirit herb was stolen, he attacked Green Robe's sect in a rage, and killed more than 100 cultivators of Green Robe's sect. Only a dozen children were left. Supremacy, do you think I should pursue this matter on their behalf? Demons are cruel by nature. What does this have to do with me? His face was full of anger. Lone Moon continued. Now, those dozen children were originally considered to have cultivated well in Green Robe's sect. Who knows, they might even be able to attain the Great Tao. But because of a spirit herb, they were annihilated. And this spirit herb happened to be taken by you. To put it bluntly, it was the entire Green Robe sect in exchange for supremacy's life. Green Robe's sect was gone just like that. Saying that demons were cruel by nature was not so simple. His face paled. What do you want? Nothing. Lone Moon shrugged. It's just that these children are now in my honesty sect. In the future, when they cultivate and seek the Tao, they won't need any spirit stones or Dharma artifacts. Only then did Wu Xiang grit his teeth and say, "I give." With that said, he directly untied the storage bag at his waist, and took out a bag of spirit stones, and handed it over. Lone Moon weighed the bag. There are more than a dozen children. The corner of his mouth twitched, and he took out a dozen more bags. Yes, I still lack some Dharma artifacts. Continue digging. Elixirs and whatnot have to be prepared. Continue digging. Defensive Dharma clothes and whatnot are needed. Children grow fast. Continue digging. Oh yes, and array talismans and whatnot. Here you are. Wu Xiang simply stuffed the entire storage bag into his hand. Is this enough? Of course, of course. Lone Moon accepted it with a smile. Humph. Wu Xiang turned and walked out. Just as he reached the door, Lone Moon suddenly added, "Oh yes, in the future, if the children need anything, I will send the bill to Divine Heaven's sect." Wu Xiang stumbled and almost fell down. He immediately wrote his sword and disappeared without a trace. Lone Moon then looked at the storage bag in his hand. Humph. What was he trying to show off in front of him? If he didn't peel off a layer of his skin, his surname would not be Niu. Take it. He casually threw the storage bag to Lu Hong. Remember to send him a bill every month. With that said, he clapped his hands and turned to fly back to Invincible Peak. Lu Hong. Everyone. Gap Goggle. JPG, they didn't just pick up a soul formation supremacy. They picked up a god of fortune. Chapter 318. Master, I want to learn sword techniques. Chef, who had just finished cooking, suddenly spoke up. Huh. Shen Ying's chopsticks paused. Why did Chef suddenly have such a dangerous idea? Lu Tao and the others are also at Qi Refinement, but they've already started learning sword techniques. He said seriously with a straight face. Who is Lu Tao? I'm Master's disciple. I don't want to lose to them. Master, can you teach me sword techniques? Shen Ying faltered for a moment. It was a good thing for a disciple to improve. She could not discourage him, so she nodded. Sure. It was just sword techniques. She had experience. Chef's eyes brightened. He jumped down from the chair. As the saying goes, all the martial arts in the world. Shut up. Before she could finish, Lone Moon suddenly picked up a piece of meat and stuffed it into her mouth. Don't teach me if you don't ***King no. Qian, I used to. Shen Ying opened her mouth to explain. That's the past. Lone Moon glared at her. What Chef lacked was his spirit, not his cultivation. Wasn't her bluffing to get him to have an epiphany buff? Wasn't that just more of a hindrance? All of them were troublesome. He rubbed his forehead and turned to look at I Ching, who was not much taller than the chair. For a moment he was in a dilemma. Chef's sword technique was created by him, and it complemented his sword intent. Not to mention Shen Ying. Even he did not know how to use it. If he randomly taught I Ching, it might backfire. Chef. I Ching. The Tao of the sword depends on one's own understanding. As for sword techniques, it still depends on oneself. We can't teach you either. He frowned. He was a child after all. He did not hide the disappointment in his eyes. After a while he looked up. Then how can I understand? Naturally, you can only slowly. He stopped mid-sentence. He suddenly thought of something. Oh yes, why don't I set up a few sword arrays? If you can break through, maybe you will understand something. All right. I Ching nodded hard. There was even some excitement in his eyes. I will set up an easy sword array first. When you succeed, I will increase the difficulty. As he summoned a spirit sword and handed it to him, he explained. But you don't have any foundation in swordsmanship, and your cultivation is only at the Qi refinement level. It's very dangerous for you to rashly enter the sword array, and there's even a possibility of you getting seriously injured. Have you thought it through? I Ching turned to look at Shen Ying, his eyes filled with determination. Yes, I'm not afraid. Then from tomorrow onwards, you will go to the martial arts practice field on the main peak. I will set up a sword formation there. You will enter the formation at 6 o'clock in the morning, and the sword formation will only rest at 9 o'clock in the morning. All right. He nodded his little head. After a while he thought of something and asked anxiously. Then can I come out in the afternoon? What? Lone Moon glanced at him. Giving up so quickly. This was not Chef's style. Noon is Master's lunchtime. I got it. The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. She had lost all her memories, yet she did not forget a single thing. When the time comes, I will bring you out of the array. Only then did he feel relieved. After thinking for a while, he cupped his fists and said respectfully, "Thank you, Supremacy." Lone Moon stiffened. A trace of awkwardness flashed across his face. In the past, he had seen Chef's disdainful, dismissive, or discriminating look. Suddenly, he was still not used to thanking him so seriously. "Master, master." I Ching turned his head. His eyes seemed to be lit up instantly. He looked straight at Shenning beside him and said with some excitement, "I will work hard to understand swordsmanship and become more powerful than anyone else. In the future, I can also protect Master." Shenning was stunned. After a while, "I know." Lone Moon seemed to have really started to put Chef through devil training. Every day before dawn, Chef would disappear, leaving only a table full of dishes. He would come back at noon and at night, and then disappear again. His small body that was originally made of spirit chi now had some vague shadow of sword chi. It seemed that Lone Moon's method was indeed effective. The figure that was originally by her side every day, calling Master, Master, suddenly disappeared. Shenning was really not used to it. This went on for a few months. Chef went back and forth between the martial arts arena and the kitchen every day. The sword chi on his body became thicker and thicker. Even his temperament became more and more stable. He became more and more like the Chef of the past. Until one day, "Master, I broke the sword array today." His little body had grown a lot taller, and he grinned widely at Shenning. She was stunned for a moment. She looked him up and down. After a while she nodded. Master, I've suddenly comprehended 3 sword techniques." Master, so that sword array is really hard to break." Master, I will understand more in the future." Master, I came back late today. Are you hungry?" "Not hungry." That's good." With that said, he seemed to finally be unable to take it anymore. He swayed a few times and directly fell down. Seeing that he was about to fall to the ground, Shenning grabbed him and directly carried him up. She did not know if it was because the sword in his hand was much heavier than before. Shenning sighed. Then, she turned into the house and put him on the bed. In the blink of an eye, the bed was dyed red. I Ching's body was covered in blood. His Dharma robe was torn into pieces. She could faintly see the complicated sword marks. She subconsciously turned to look behind her. The person who had just followed her in. "Why are you looking at me? I'm not the one who hurt him." Lone Moon glared at her. "And he ran back without letting me treat him." I was still puzzled. "He's learning too quickly. In less than 7 months, he broke my sword array. It's as if he can't wait to improve himself. I don't know why he's working so hard. Even if he did not learn anything, as long as he recovered his memory, his cultivation would all return." Shenning frowned. She glanced at the little bloody man on the bed. She directly reached out and pointed at the void. Immediately, a light screen appeared on Chef's body. She pointed with her fingertip and adjusted the data on it. The wounds on Chef, who was originally a bloody man, disappeared instantly. Not to mention the blood stains. Even the cuts on his Dharma robe automatically healed. It was as if it had never been torn. The pitiful child on the bed had instantly turned back into the tender and delicate jade doll. "Holy shit. You used administrative authority to directly change his data." Lone Moon's eyes widened. "Isn't the level of your healing skills too high?" Shenning turned to look at him. "Can't I?" The corner of Lone Moon's mouth twitched. "Yes, of course you can. Besides, he's your man. What does it have to do with me?" Humph. To think that he had chased after her so worriedly. Lone Moon stuffed the healing elixir in his hand back and turned to walk out the door. "I'll go back first. Look after him. Rest more today. From tomorrow onwards, he will enter a new sword array." Shit. He still had to go back to set up an array in the middle of the night. He did not know what he owed this pair of master and disciple. "Oh." Shenning nodded. Suddenly, as if recalling something, she said, "Father Neo." "What?" "I'm so hungry. I haven't had dinner yet. Do you have anything to eat?" "Get lost." Lone Moon glared at her. "There's a limit on pig feed today." With that said, he waved his hand and left a few plates of pastries on the table. He turned and walked out of the house. Sigh, Father Neo would die if he did not act Sundara. Chapter 319. Lone Moon set up 10 sword arrays in the arena at once, from simple to difficult, covering all levels, from chi refinement to nascent soul. It could be said to be the best place to practice sword Dao and understand sword intent. In the beginning, he only did it for Chef. His sword techniques were self-created. Lone Moon had also heard him say that his sword techniques were all realized through countless life and death battles. Chef didn't remember the past, and naturally didn't remember his own sword techniques, but his body's instincts were still there. So entering the sword array, and actually fighting it made him remember that sword techniques were really effective. Reality proved that it was indeed effective. Ever since he spent more than half a year to break the first formation, it was as if he had turned on some sword technique switch, and he had indeed comprehended many sword techniques. Seeing that it was exactly the same as the one he used before, Lone Moon heaved a sigh of relief. But Lu Tao suddenly found him, and asked if he could let other disciples enter for a trial. Most of Honesty's sect were sword cultivators, and learning a sword array was indeed very beneficial for cultivation. Lone Moon naturally wouldn't refuse, so the disciples swarmed in. For a time, the sword array in the arena became a place that people had to pass through for cultivation in the sect. But Chef was born with a sword body, and was after all different from others. He had to raise the threshold to the 7th level of chi refinement before he could enter the first array for a trial. 5 years later, unknowingly, the little bean had already sprouted like a sprout. Although he still looked a little young, he was already as tall as Lone Moon. Although he hadn't remembered the past, he was already becoming more and more like the quiet and serious person he used to be. Only Shining felt that he seemed to have grown a little crooked, especially the talkative trait he had when he was young, which didn't seem to have fully recovered. Master, it's snowing today. Even with the protection of Dharma clothes, you need to wear more. Master, don't sleep on the table. I made a reclining chair. If you really don't want to go back to the house, you can sit there. Master, don't drink tea at night. It's not good for sleep. How about drinking some Phoenix Jade juice? Master, it's already so late. Let's eat this cake tomorrow morning, or you won't be able to sleep at night again. Master, you've been eating this kind of meat for 3 days in a row. How about changing it? He had to mention everything big and small. Shening even had the illusion that she had an extra mother cow, but after being talked about by him, she got used to it. A 0. However, in these few years, the growth of his cultivation was not very obvious. He had just reached the foundation establishment great circle. It was on a completely different level compared to the previous skipping levels. He must have suppressed his cultivation, which is why he hasn't reached core formation. But that's right too. Everything before core formation is the foundation. It'll be better for him to form his core formation after he understands sword intent. Oh, he didn't understand. Let's go. Sect Master seems to be looking for us. Lone Moon pointed to the main peak in front of them. Huh. Shening paused. Me? Yes. You've been cooped up here for a few years. It's time for you to go out and take a walk. Lone Moon really could not stand it anymore. She was just waiting to be fed. He directly pulled her up. Not only you but also Chef. Since I'm going to the main peak, I might as well go to the martial arts arena to look for a chef. So troublesome. Troublesome my ass. Let's go. Lone Moon directly pulled her through the transportation array and teleported to the martial arts arena. From afar, they could see many disciples coming and going from that direction. They were probably disciples who had just left the array. Their faces were all filled with excitement, disappointment, doubt, or fear. There were also many people gathered together to discuss something. Lone Moon did not pay much attention at first. After all, ever since the sword array was created, this was the place that sword cultivator disciples of the sect frequented. He even purposely restrained his aura, so that they could discuss in peace. Silently, he received a pile of 5-star praise. These sword arrays set up by the supremacies are too powerful. I've already been breaking through for a month, but I haven't even made it through the first level. That's right. It's indeed a sword array set up by a soul formation supremacy. I heard that even eldest senior brother Lu Tao could only make it to the 5th level. Wow, senior brother Lu Tao is a foundation establishment cultivator. but he can only make it to the 5th level. I wonder when someone can make it through all 10 levels of the sword array. Of course it's little Uncle Master I Ching. He has already made it to the 8th level. What? Gosh, isn't that a level that only golden core cultivators can enter? That's nothing. I heard that when he was cultivating chi, he had already made it to the 1st level. He was only 10 years old then. Little Uncle Master is indeed the first disciple of Supremacy Lone Moon. Little Uncle Master is not the disciple of Supremacy Lone Moon. He is the disciple of another soul formation supremacy in the sect. There's a second soul formation supremacy in the sect? The disciple was shocked. Of course there is. I heard that she joined the sect together with Supremacy Lone Moon. I heard that her surname is Shun. The disciple suddenly thought of something and lowered his voice. But she never leaves the invincible peak. I've been in the sect for so many years and I've never seen her. Lone Moon gave a look of disdain to the disciple, who was chewing on a fruit beside him. It's fine if she doesn't have a sense of existence, but she's also lazy. If little Uncle Master is so powerful, is her master even more powerful? Lone Moon had to agree with this point. He had no intention to continue listening, and was about to walk past. That's not for sure. The disciple suddenly shook his head and said with a gossipy look, even the sect master has never seen her fight. No one knows what her cultivation level is like. We only know that she's a female cultivator. But little Uncle Master has been with that person since she was young. She did not cultivate until she was 10 years old. Only when she grew older did she let her out to practice swordsmanship. The two of them are very close. The two of them live in a small building on the Invincible Peak. The other disciples seemed to have thought of something and looked shocked. You're saying that little Uncle Master is actually a human cauldron that Supremacy Shin is raising? Shinning. Pu Lomon's face twisted. He instantly set up an isolation array, and held his stomach as he laughed maniacally. Ha 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 ha. You're a homebody. People are saying that you're a pervert who raises boys as human cauldrons. Ha 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 ha. I'm dying of laughter. If that's the case, little Uncle Master is too pitiful. The disciple looked indignant. That Supremacy Shin is too much. But who can go against a soul formation supremacy? Little Uncle Master is cultivating so hard. Maybe she's not satisfied. That's not what I've heard. Suddenly a disciple retorted. Everyone looked over. Nobody has seen that Supremacy Shin. Who knows how strong she is? But Supremacy Lomon's ability is obvious to all. I heard that this 10-level sword array was specially set up by Supremacy Lone Moon for little Uncle Master. If we're talking about being nice to him, who can be nicer than Supremacy Lone Moon? So from what I see, that Supremacy Shin is just a distraction. The one who is really interested in little Uncle Master is Supremacy Lone Moon. Oh, everyone was enlightened. Lone Moon who froze. Shunning. A moment later, she silently turned to look at the person beside her. Oh, so you're like this, Father Nyo. Oh, your sister. I didn't say anything. Take back that look you're giving me, he said word by word. I'm straight. If I wasn't keeping an eye on you too, I would have been single long ago. Oh, shut up. Chapter 320. Lone Moon did not expect to be implicated by a random gossip. He lifted his hand and undid the isolation array. Cold air flowed out from his body, and a low pressure swept towards the disciples. The disciples were shocked. When they saw the two people coming over, they shivered and shrunk into a quail. Their faces were full of vigor. They braced themselves and bowed. Greetings, Supremacy. You have the time to talk nonsense here. Looks like you're very confident in breaking the array. Everyone. Lone Moon waved his hand, and a wind spell blew everyone back into the array. It was still the 2nd level. For a moment, the entire array was filled with cries of pain. When they reached the main hall, Lone Moon's face was black. He suddenly had the urge to increase the difficulty of the sex array. Let's see if they still have the time to make up nonsense. Supremacy, Lone Moon? Lu Hong was confused by Lone Moon's stare. He thought about the sect. Did the sect lose money recently? The income from spirit herbs and dharma artifacts even doubled. There were no new disciples added to the sect's burden. Why did Supremacy look so scary? Why did you call us here? Lone Moon sat on the chair at the side, and looked at Lu Hong with a cold gaze. Lu Hong trembled subconsciously. So scary. He could not help but send a look of help to Xining. Unfortunately, she was focused on eating her fruit, and did not receive his signal. He could not help but send a voice transmission. Supremacy? Shun supremacy, Lo Moon? Xining shrugged and said nonchalantly. Men, there are always a few days every month. Lu Hong. Is there something wrong with that? I Ching. Master's words are so profound. I can't understand them at all. Lo Moon. I can hear you. Hurry up and say it. What's the matter? Lo Moon's mouth twitched. Lu Hong coughed and glanced at I Ching, who was standing behind Xining. Then with a straight face he said, It's like this. The Hongyu mystic realm is about to open. I want to take this opportunity to let the disciples of the sect go there to train. Maybe they can find an opportunity to advance. Hongyu mystic realm? Lo Moon was stunned. Why had he never heard of this mystic realm? The Hongyu mystic realm is a small mystic realm opened by a cultivator who was about to ascend tens of thousands of years ago. It only opens once every 100 years. Lu Hong explained. Every time it opens, it lasts for 2 months. Although there aren't any great opportunities inside, there are many demonic beasts. It's the most suitable place for cultivators below the golden core stage to gain experience. You want the sect's foundation establishment disciples to participate? Lo Moon asked. Yes. He nodded and said. While the disciples of the sect often train in the sword array, they rarely have the chance to fight with demonic beasts. Moreover, most of them have never left Honesty Sect, so it's good to let them go out and gain some experience. Lo Moon nodded. It would be good for them to form a team and go for a dungeon. They could practice their teamwork. Among the Foundation establishment disciples, junior brother I Ching's cultivation is the highest, and he has a calm personality. The disciples all respect him the most. Lu Hong looked at I Ching and said, he could be considered the first person in the whole Azure world to have perfected the Foundation establishment within 5 years. So I want him to personally lead the disciples into the mystic realm. After all, he was personally taught by Supremacy Lo Moon. He's much stronger than those bald brats. Lo Moon's face darkened. Get rid of that. Do you believe I won't beat you up? Lu Hong. Huh. Did he say something wrong? I said, you can make the decisions in the sect. Lo Moon glared at him. Besides, he's not my disciple. Why ask me? Just ask her. With that said, he pointed at the person beside him. Lu Hong then looked at Xining. Then Supremacy. Shin, what do you mean? Xining was stunned. She turned to look at Chef behind her. Do you want to go? I Ching's cold expression softened. He looked at her more intently. If it's really beneficial to cultivation, disciple will try his best. Oh, then go. Yes, master. Leave some food before you leave. A smile slid across I Ching's eyes. Yes, master. No problem, master. Lu Hong. Why did it feel weird that they were teaching disciples? Then it's settled. A hint of joy flashed across Lu Hong's eyes. With I Ching around, the disciples had another layer of protection. Then in 3 days, I'll gather the disciples and set off. With that said, he thought of something. He took out a storage bag and handed it to I Ching. I've already prepared the spirit stones. Spirit stones? Lo Moon's ears pricked up. What spirit stones? They're spirit stones to enter the mystic realm. Lu Hong explained with a natural expression. This mystic realm is near Divine Heaven's sect. It has always been under their jurisdiction. If disciples from other sects want to enter, they have to pay a portion of the spirit stones. How much is a portion? 10 superior grade spirit stones per person, or 300 middle grade spirit stones. So expensive. Lo Moon was shocked. Fortunately, Supremacy is here. Otherwise, in previous years, our sect would not have been able to take out this batch of spirit stones. Lo Moon frowned. So mystic realms were actually this profitable? Lu Hong, are you familiar with the sect master of Divine Heaven's sect? Huh. Lu Hong was confused. He did not know why he suddenly asked this. We've had some relations over the years, mainly because the sect's wallet was full. It's good that we're friends. Lo Moon stood up. A hint of CEO light flashed across his eyes. Come, Let me discuss something with you. Shening. I Ching. He suddenly had a premonition that he would be able to eat supper in the future. Nobody knew what Lone Moon and Lu Hong discussed that day. He disappeared on the same day. 3 days later, in the group that set off for Divine Heaven's sect, there was not only Lone Moon who sent them off, but also Shening, who was forcibly dragged along. It took them 2 days to fly all the way to this first-class sect, Divine Heaven's sect. Compared to Honesty's sect, which was a middle-grade immortal sect, Divine Heaven's sect, which was known as the #1 sect, was much bigger. It was just that the spirit chi was not as rich as Honesty's sect, which had half an immortal meridian. Therefore, compared to the other sects who had also entered the secret realm, but were sizing up their surroundings with faces full of shock and admiration, their group of disciples, who were looking straight ahead, appeared to be especially calm. It was inevitable that they would stand out from the crowd. The spirit chi was so thin, it was not even as good as the kitchen in the sect. The disciples suddenly felt a sense of pride for not lacking in money. When they flew to the square in front of the entrance of the mystic realm, it was already densely packed with disciples of various sections. Before the welcoming disciple could pass on the message, a soul formation cultivator flew towards them. Are you fellow Taoist Lone Moon from Honesty Sect? Sect Master Dong. Lone Moon smiled and bowed to that side. The person who came was the sect master of Divine Heaven's sect, Dong Wu. Chapter 321. Ha 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 ha. Fellow Taoist Lone Moon, you're finally here. You've made me wait for a long time. Dong Wu smiled like a sunflower, looking very friendly and enthusiastic. Even the people present couldn't help but look back. There were many soul formation supremacies among the other cultivators who came to send off their disciples. But Dong Wu didn't act like this. I've received your message a few days ago. Come, come, come. As he spoke, he pulled Lone Moon and flew towards the main hall. No rush, no rush. Lone Moon didn't move, but smiled even more brightly. I'm here this time to send my disciples into the mystic realm, to gain experience. I can't delay my business. Yes, yes, yes. Dong Wu nodded repeatedly, and led him towards the entrance of the mystic realm. He directly walked past those new sects, and stood beside the Divine Heaven's sect disciples. While waiting for the mystic realm to open, he chatted with Lone Moon. No one knew how he managed to bluff them, but when it was time for the sects to pay the mystic realm entrance fee, Honesty sect didn't pay a single spirit stone. Instead, Dong Wu took out a bag of spirit stones and stuffed it into Lone Moon's hands. Looking at the markings on the bag, it seemed to contain quite a number of supreme-grade spirit stones. Lu Hong was stunned by the sight, completely unaware of what was happening. When did the supremacy become so familiar with the sect master of Divine Heaven's sect? Why didn't he know at all? Speaking of which, wouldn't Honesty sect be poached? What should he do if he suddenly panicked? The mystic realm is open. Someone shouted. A white light suddenly flashed in the sky above the square, and the space twisted. In a short while, a spiral-shaped entrance to the mystic realm appeared. Waves of cheers came from all around, and the disciples waiting to enter all had excited expressions on their faces. The high-level cultivators who came to send them off also seized the time, and began to remind them of various things to take note of when entering the mystic realm. It was just that in other sects, it was the masters who reminded the disciples, but here at Honesty sect, Master, I've sealed the food for these days in the storage bag. You don't have to worry about being hungry. Master, I've already set up a dust-removing array that activates regularly on Invincible Peak. It will clean automatically. Master, I'll be gone for a month, and the weather is turning cold. Remember to wear more clothes. Yes, yes, yes. Master, don't lean on the table after eating. You'll fall asleep if you lean on it. No one will send you back to your room if I'm not around. Oh, Master, if you're bored, don't go out alone. I've already told the disciple at the foot of the mountain. You just have to shout, and he'll lead the way for you. And Master, Lone Moon. Shening. All the disciples. Was there something wrong with the style of their sect? Ahem. Speaking of which, why can't we enter the secret realm? Seeing that the way they were looking at them was getting weirder and weirder, Lone Moon could not help but interrupt Chef's words. He had a feeling that he had exposed something. Dongwu, who was on the side, was also stunned. Only then did he realize that the disciples of his own sect were standing in the same place and had not set off. Because they were the hosts, if Divine Heaven's sect didn't move, the other sects would naturally go in first. What's going on? He frowned and couldn't help but look at the disciples of his own sect. Why aren't you going in? Sect Master. The leading disciple at the front of the team turned pale and said with some difficulty, It's the people from Non-Phase Peak who haven't arrived yet. Disciples of junior brother Non-Phase? Dongwu frowned. A trace of dissatisfaction flashed in his eyes. Hurry up and send someone to urge them. No need. As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar voice sounded. A middle-aged cultivator flew over from the sky. The person who came was Non-Phase, who once rushed up to Wu Wang and was cheated by Lone Moon. Senior brother, I'm already here. He still had that arrogant look, and there were 3 disciples behind him. In fact, the one with the highest cultivation was the disciple on the right. He was in the middle stage of foundation establishment, and his aura was not very stable, as if he had just broken through. And it was an acquaintance. It was Jing Qi, who suddenly disappeared from the sect back then. His body was obviously much taller, and he already looked like an adult. It was just that the layer of fat shadow on the outside of him was really too eye-catching, making people completely ignore the image of the body that he occupied. But his face looked even gloomier than when he was young. His whole person was gloomy, and there was even some resentment between his brows. Loman's eyes narrowed. It seemed that all these years, his method of sending bills to Non-Phase every month was still effective. Indeed, Non-Phase still had some animosity towards this disciple. Previously, he vowed that he would only accept 1 disciple, and now he had already accepted 3. And the luck that originally filled Jing Qi's body seemed to have dissipated a lot. It's you. Once Non-Phase landed, he saw Lone Moon beside him and was instantly shocked. Supremacy Non-Phase, long time no see. Lone Moon smiled with a businesslike expression. The corner of Non-Phase's mouth twitched, and he seemed to think of something. He snorted coldly and ignored him. He turned back and waved at the 3 disciples. Right. The 3 nodded, and then stood among the disciples of Divine Heaven's sect. Instead, Jing Qi looked back frequently, and his gaze fell on Yi Qing, who was beside Shining. His expression became even more gloomy, with some undetectable ruthlessness. Yi Qing. He didn't expect him to come too. Not only was he in the same foundation establishment as him, but his cultivation seemed to be higher than his. Why? Why was it him? He was clearly also a disciple of a soul formation supremacy. Why was he always 1 step ahead of him? Everyone is here, let's go in. Dongwu instructed, and all the disciples turned back and bowed. Then, they mounted their swords and flew towards the direction of the mystic realm. Seeing that all the disciples of Divine Heaven's sect had entered, it was naturally the turn of those from Honesty's sect, who were closest to them. Yi Qing clenched his fists by his side and looked back at Shening again. Master, wait for me to come back. With that said, he flew in with everyone and disappeared behind the door in an instant. The other sects also followed in. In less than a moment, there were only a few dozen high-level cultivators who came to send off their disciples in the originally lively square. And it seemed a little empty. Junior brother. Dongwu then looked at Wu Xiang beside him and said with some disapproval, The opening of the mystic realm is a big event in the sect. I hope junior brother can prepare in advance in the future, and don't miss the timing like today. A trace of anger rose in Wu Xiang's heart, but he couldn't show it, so he could only nod and say, Yes, senior brother. With that said, he looked at Lone Moon beside him. I still have things to do in my peak, so I won't accompany senior brother. With that said, he directly turned and flew away on his sword. Dongwu looked at the person who flew away, sighed and frowned. He also didn't like this junior brother Wu Xiang. Among all the peak masters in the sect, his temperament was the weirdest. Many years ago, he was unwilling to accept disciples in the sect, but a few years ago, he suddenly brought one back, saying that he was the only disciple. Unexpectedly, after 2 years, he took a fancy to 2 new disciples with celestial spirit roots. Originally, They had already been accepted by other peak masters, and were only short of a master's gift. But he insisted on snatching them, which gave him a headache for a while as the sect master. Chapter 322. Sorry for the embarrassment, fellow Taoist Lone Moon. Thinking of the person beside him, Dong Wu's expression brightened, and he quickly moved aside with a warm smile. About the 10-level sword array mentioned in the letter. Could you please tell us about it in the main hall? Of course. Lone Moon didn't refuse, and followed him with a smile. After a while he paused, turned back, and pulled Shining to catch up. If he didn't keep an eye on them, they would definitely get lost. This is. Dong Wu seemed to notice Shining just now. Wasn't she a disciple going out to gain experience? My daughter. No, my junior sister Shining. Lone Moon quickly corrected himself. Oh, fellow Taoist Shin, please come in. So the three walked towards the main hall of Divine Heaven's sect. Lu Hong, who was left behind. He suddenly felt that Honesty's sect didn't seem to need a sect master. Forget it, he'd better go home and count his spirit stones. This time, Wu Wang did not bring many people into the mystic territory. There were only about 30 people in total. Lu Hong had already divided them into two groups. One group was led by Lu Tao. The other group was led by I Ching. I Ching's temperament was cold, and he did not like to speak. But perhaps because he was too ruthless in clearing the sword array in the sect, other than being familiar to the disciples, he also gave people the illusion that he was unreachable. There was no disciple of the same level who did not respect him. Basically, he could control everyone with just a look. In addition, most of the team were sword cultivators. Sword cultivators cultivated their understanding of sword Tao. And the most important thing in sword Tao was actual combat. To sum it up in one sentence, fight. So compared to other sects who had to pay attention to various spirit plants or refining materials, and try their best to avoid demon beasts along the way, this group of people came for the demon beasts. Not only did they not need to avoid, but they also looked for nests everywhere, and went straight to the depths of the mystic realm. They didn't know if it was bad luck, but the few demon beasts they met along the way were all level 2 or 3, and no higher level. Level 2 and 3 demon beasts were equivalent to the Qi refinement stage, and were no challenge to them at all. It wasn't until 3 days later that they encountered a rank 5 demonic beast. Everyone's face lit up with joy as they got into formation and started fighting. It took them 6 hours to defeat the demonic beast. Besides I Ching, everyone's spirit Qi had been depleted. No one else could move. I Ching looked at the crowd before walking towards the dead demon beast with his sword in hand. With a wave of the sword in his hand, a sword light flashed, and he directly took out the demon core in the demon beast's stomach. He looked down and suddenly looked up to ask, "Who has the ice spirit root?" Everyone was stunned. One of the disciples raised his hand in a daze. "I have an ice spirit root, but it's a wood and ice dual spirit root." "Oh," I Ching responded, and directly threw the demon pill in his hand over. "Take it." Ah. The disciple was stunned and reflexively caught it. For me? He didn't know how to react. This was a demonic core, and it was from a 5th-order demonic beast. He gave it away just like that. Although everyone had attacked together just now, everyone could tell that little martial uncle was the only one who had put in the effort. If it weren't for him, they probably wouldn't have been able to take down this demonic beast. Everyone was also confused. Thinking about it carefully, they thought that no matter what demonic beast they encountered along the way, although little martial uncle rarely attacked, and only looked after them from the side, he didn't seem to take anything at all. This was too selfless. Everyone's heart suddenly warmed, and they were touched. Just as they were about to say something, suddenly a loud roar of a demonic beast came. A large part of the trees in front of them fell with a rumble, even the ground shook. A giant beast that was as tall as 3 people appeared in front of them. It was shaped like a cow, but its body was covered in scales. There were 2 rows of horns on its head, and it had 9 tails on its back. Its 4 hooves were stepping on flames. It roared loudly at the crowd, and a scorching aura suddenly rushed towards them, as if it was going to burn the surroundings. "It's a flame-hooved beast," a disciple exclaimed. Everyone's face turned pale. Oh my God. This is a sixth-order demonic beast, equivalent to the golden core stage. What can we do? We can't beat it. We have no energy left. Little Marshall Uncle quickly. Before they could finish their words, a rain of swords suddenly fell down with a swoosh. In an instant, the 3-person tall beast was pierced into a sieve, and it fell to the ground with a bang, without a sound. All the disciples. What did you say? I Ching turned back. No, nothing? Oh. I Ching turned back and slashed again, directly cutting open the belly of the demonic beast, took out a red pearl, and continued to ask, who has the fire spirit root? I am. Take it. With that said, he threw the demon core over, then turned around with his sword squatted down, and started cutting the meat from the carcass. All the disciples. Wait a minute. Did they see wrongly? Little Marshall Uncle was cutting the meat of the demonic beast. Whether it was refining pills or weapons, the meat of demonic beasts was of no use to cultivators. Why did Little Marshall Uncle cut the meat? Could it be because he gave all the demon cores to them, but was afraid that they would feel guilty? So he cut some useless meat, pretending to get something? All the disciples looked at each other, tears welling up in their eyes. So touching. They were actually lucky to have such an uncle master. Little Marshall Uncle, the disciple who just took the fire element demon core, gritted his teeth and handed it back, saying, actually, I don't need this demon core. Me too. The disciple who just took the ice element demon core also said, I don't need it either. So Little Marshall Uncle should keep it for yourself, don't patronize us. I Ching finally looked up at the moved crowd, and was stunned for a moment before replying, oh, then throw it away. Disciple 1. Disciple 2. All the disciples. I Ching completely did not see the dumbfounded expressions of the crowd. He stuffed the meat he cut into the storage bag, turned and said, let's go. With that said, he continued to go deeper into the mystic realm. Everyone looked at each other for a while, and could only follow. Their hearts were even more touched. Little Marshall Uncle must not want to make things difficult for them. That's why he did not take back the demon core. It must be. So the same situation played out continuously in the next few days. Slaughtering a 5th-level demonic beast. I Ching was cutting the meat. Killing a 6th-level demonic beast. I Ching was still cutting the meat. Killing a 7th-level demonic beast. I Ching was still cutting the meat. Encountering an 8th-level demonic beast. I Ching finally cut a piece of meat with great difficulty, and ran away with them. All the disciples. Why did it feel like Little Marshall Uncle was not here to train, but to look for ingredients? No, this must be their illusion. Chapter 323. Everyone headed towards the depths of the mystic realm, at an extremely fast speed. Basically, the demon beasts below the 3rd level took turns to go up. The 4th and 5th level demon beasts all went up together. Little Uncle Master went up for those above the 5th level, and those above the 8th level were not allowed to go up, so they turned and ran. Along the way they had great teamwork. Although there were a few close calls, fortunately there were no major problems. After all, this mystic realm was only a small golden core mystic realm. I Ching led the group to clear the monsters in the mystic realm for more than 20 days, until the storage bag beside him could not hold any more meat. Then he turned to everyone and said, let's go back. The disciples who were already holding a pile of demon cores of their own spirit roots all nodded in gratitude. Finally, there was no need to continue. Otherwise the demon beasts in this mystic realm would probably go extinct. Everyone flew up on their swords at the fastest speed, intending to fly back. But suddenly there was a flash of green light not far away, and with a bang, it exploded in the air, slowly forming the shape of a flower. This is the distress signal of Red and Green Sect. A disciple exclaimed, it's not far from here. I think someone is in danger. Everyone turned to look at the person leading them inquiringly. I Ching frowned, and turned to look at everyone. Be careful, let's go over and take a look. With that said, he turned and flew in the direction of the fading pattern on his sword. The disciples also summoned their spirit swords and followed. This was already the depths of the mystic realm, and it was almost impossible to meet people from other sections. There were very few people who saw the distress signal sent here, and it was possible that there was no one else nearby except for them. Although they were not from their own sect, they were all immortal sects, so they naturally had to help if they could. The direction of the signal was not far, and the few of them arrived within a few minutes. I Ching was the first to arrive. He had already landed, and was looking ahead with a solemn expression. In front of him was a pitch-black swamp, shrouded in a faint layer of black qi, as if the entire swamp was boiling, and it was bubbling disgustingly. There were also some unactivated Dharma talismans floating on the swamp. Little Uncle Master. All the disciples landed and looked at the swamp in front of them. What is this? Why is there so much demonic qi in the swamp? Before he had time to think about it, a surprised voice sounded. Big brother next door, it's you. Everyone was stunned and turned to look at the center of the quagmire. They saw a large tree in the center of the quagmire tremble. Its branches and leaves split apart, revealing a slightly childish face. He was dressed in a pink robe and looked to be about 13 or 14 years old. Half of his body was already in the mud, and he was holding onto a tree branch with one hand, as if he was afraid of falling. Perhaps the tree she had grabbed was too dense, so no one had noticed it before. It's a junior sister. The disciple behind I Ching panicked and subconsciously took 2 steps forward. Wait! No! The girl in the swamp and I Ching exclaimed at the same time, but it was too late. The disciple had already stepped into the swamp, and in the next moment, the entire swamp seemed to be activated. Suddenly, a huge black wave rose up and rushed towards the giant. Back off! I Ching reminded loudly. At the same time, he waved his sword and cut off the black wave. He took a few steps back. Little martial uncle behind us! A disciple exclaimed. Looking back, he saw that the swamp had already circled behind them and surrounded them, trapping them in the middle. Sword kinesis! I Ching reminded everyone to fly. All the disciples began to conjure hand seals, but it was too late. The swamp had already spread to their feet. The spirit qi that they had just gathered was instantly emptied. His body sank down uncontrollably. This swamp can absorb spirit qi. All the disciples were shocked. I Ching frowned. Seeing that everyone was about to be swallowed by the swamp, he tightened his grip on the sword in his hand. Sword qi exploded from all over his body, and the sword in his hand danced quickly and hurriedly. Thousands of sword qi appeared and struck the black swamp. Taking advantage of the moment when the swamp dispersed, he directly threw the trapped disciples out one by one. But this would only make him sink deeper into the swamp. Little martial uncle! All the disciples could see his plan. For a moment they were touched and anxious. If this went on, he would not be able to go back. Go! I Ching said in a low voice. Finally, he threw the last disciple out, and let himself sink deeper and deeper into the swamp. He said in front of Master that he would take good care of these disciples, so no one could be left behind. Little martial uncle! Everyone shouted anxiously, but they could only watch as the black swamp submerged I Ching's head. Together with the girl from Red and Green sect, they were completely submerged in darkness. In the guest room of Divine Heaven's sect, Shening, who was eating, suddenly stood up. What are you doing? Lo Moon glanced at her. Shening tilted her head. After a while, she sat back with a normal expression. Nothing, my back hurts after sitting for too long. TCH, crazy. Madame Nio's face was full of disdain. Asterisk. Senior brother. What do we do? The rescued disciples flew in the sky on their swords, looking anxiously at the swamp that was no longer moving. Tears flowed uncontrollably. It was because of them that little martial uncle was trapped. Wait! The disciple with the highest cultivation among them gritted his teeth. Little martial uncle is so powerful. He can even defeat a 7th-level demon beast. He must be fine now. No matter what, we have to wait for him to come out. That's right. I believe in little martial uncle. He will definitely come out. The other disciples nodded. Me too. I will wait here until he comes out. Me too. He saved our lives. At most, we'll fight it out with this swamp and pay for it with our lives. Alright, then we'll stay. We'll wait here for a day. If little martial uncle doesn't come back by then, we'll rush in. Alright. Everyone nodded and sat down on their swords. As they meditated to recover their spirit chi, they stared closely at the swamp below them. For a moment, they seemed to have forgotten that the entire mystic realm would close in 3 days. I Ching felt his vision go black. His whole body sank downwards. He could not gather any spirit chi. It was as if he had been sucked dry. His body became heavier and heavier, as if something was squeezing him. He could faintly hear the sound of wind, and it was getting closer. His heart tightened. He summoned all the sword chi in his body and subconsciously surrounded his body. With a series of crashing sounds, something bounced away from his body. That squeezing feeling disappeared. His surroundings were still pitch black. He could only use his divine perception to explore. Only then did he realize that he was sinking continuously. It was as if he was a bottomless pit. He could faintly see a large area of demonic chi condensed into wind blades. They were making crashing sounds, as if forming a wall of wind blades, directly blocking the surrounding black swamp. Chapter 324. At the edge of the wind wall, a pink figure was sinking, but the other party did not seem to feel anything. Even if her body was hit by the wind blades, she did not react for a long time. I Ching recalled that she was the one who had sent the distress signal. He immediately sent a stream of sword chi over and circled around her, blocking off the wind blades and the surrounding mud. The two of them directly sank down towards the bottom of the wind blades. After about a quarter of an hour, the surrounding wind blades and swamps had disappeared. There was still a faint light at the bottom, and the spiritual energy around them had strangely recovered a little. They should be reaching the bottom soon. I Ching mobilized his spirit chi and directly flew down on his sword, grabbing the little girl who was asking for help. Sure enough, in a short while, he landed on an open space. It was clearly underground, but suddenly it seemed to be a space that was deliberately isolated. It was very spacious, but it was still pitch black. I Ching glanced at the little girl on the ground, pinched a spell, and pointed between her eyebrows. In the next moment, the little girl woke up. Where is this? She looked around in panic. I Ching summoned a ball of fire, temporarily illuminating the surroundings. Only then did the little girl see I Ching beside her. She was shocked at first, and then she was overjoyed. Brother next door. It's you, that's great. I see you again. You are. I Ching frowned. Had they met before? It's me. She hurriedly pointed to her face and said, I'm Nyo Nyo, the Nyo Nyo who used to live next door to you. I Ching was stunned for a moment. A little girl with a runny nose flashed in his mind, and he looked at her with some surprise. Your Grandma Wang's granddaughter? Yes. She nodded hard. I've always remembered little brother. So you've become a cultivator too, and so am I. I joined the red and green sect, and Master gave me a new name. I'm called Lily now. I Ching nodded, still looking cold and serious. This is the bottom of that swamp. It's dangerous. We have to be careful at all times. The little girl called Lily nodded and hurriedly climbed up. I'll be careful and follow the brother next door. My name is I Ching. He looked around. There might be an entrance here. Let's take a look around. Lily instantly became nervous and hurriedly followed. Her eyes were full of trust for the person beside her. The two of them walked forward for a quarter of an hour, but did not find anything. Only then did I Ching realize that this place was huge. Moreover, it was very spacious. Apart from a few pillars that seemed to be supporting pillars, nothing else could be seen. However, the pillars were all engraved with strange runes. They didn't look like the characters of cultivators. Moreover, they seemed to be from many years ago, and the writing was somewhat blurred. The two of them walked for a period of time. Even the pillars were no longer intact. Many had already collapsed. I Ching felt that they should not be far from the border. Suddenly, a burst of light appeared in front of them, as if some kind of spell technique had been activated. There was a loud rumble. I Ching frowned and glanced at the person behind him. At the same time, he rode on his sword and flew in that direction. The next moment, a huge mansion suddenly appeared in front of them. It was just that the outside was wrapped in a layer of black demonic aura. The demonic aura was very thick, and did not look like it could be easily broken. and in front of the demonic aura stood a person. He was wearing a greenish-gray long robe. His hair was somewhat messy. He was constantly attacking the demonic aura, as if he was trying his best to break in. Who is it? The other party seemed to have noticed them. He turned around and looked behind him. I Ching and Lily had no choice but to fly down and land a few feet away from the other party. I Ching, it's you. The other party's eyes suddenly shrank. Many emotions flashed across his face in an instant. It seemed to be surprise, unwillingness, and resentment. After a moment, all of them were put away. He looked at the other party with a gloomy face. I didn't expect that you also have some skills. You actually made it here. I Ching was stunned. His face was blank. You are? Who? The other party's face stiffened. His whole person seemed to be ignited. His anger came out with a whoosh. He looked at him, as if he was going to bite. You dare to say that you don't know me? I don't know you. He answered instantly. You. The other party was even angrier. His face twisted. He looked like he was about to come out and stab him a few times. After a while, no one knew what he thought of. He took a deep breath and held it in. He gritted his teeth and said, I'm Jing Qi. Jing. Qi. I Ching lowered his head and thought seriously. His frown deepened. As the other party's eyes looked more and more like he was going to eat him, his eyes lit up. It seemed that he finally remembered. Oh, dog. Who's a dog? Your whole family is a dog. So it's Brother Dog. Lily's eyes lit up. She stepped forward with a look of excitement. Brother Dog, you are also an immortal cultivator. That's great. I'm Nyo Brother Dog. Do you still remember Brother Dog? I didn't expect to see your Brother Dog again. Jing Qi only felt that his heart was stabbed again and again. His mind was full of Brother Dog and the other two people. But he couldn't get angry. After clenching his teeth for a long time, he finally endured it. Nyo. His face twisted several times. There was no joy of reuniting with an old friend on his face. He seemed to be desperately trying to force a smile, but it only made him look more ferocious. You have a new name now, right? Of course, I'm called Lily. Master gave it to me. Lily. I'm called Jing Qi now. You can call me Jing Qi. Okay, Brother Dog. No problem, Brother Dog. He really wanted to kill someone. Where is this place? I Ching suddenly spoke, interrupting someone's rising murderous aura. Jing Qi was stunned. Only then did he remember his purpose. He took a deep breath and calmed down. When he got that thing, and got out of this mystic realm, he would definitely get back at him for what he had suffered today. He took a step forward and said, I don't know either. I've been trapped here for 3 days. I can roughly see that this might be a relic of an ancient mighty. Relic? Lily was shocked. And an ancient one. Although she was young, she had also heard that all relic was a great opportunity. Something flashed in Jing Qi's eyes. He continued, in front of us should be the residence of the person who built this mystic realm. But the outside is surrounded by this demonic aura. I can't get in. He pointed to the front and revealed a hearty and generous smile. Since we came from the same village, we should be of the same breath and branches and help each other. Why don't we work together to rush in today and share the opportunities inside? Brother Dog, is this demonic aura very powerful? Lily frowned. The corner of Jing Qi's mouth twitched again. He thought of the serious matter and nodded. It's indeed very powerful. I tried my best but couldn't rush in. I'm afraid that only the 3 of us working together can break through. Chapter 325. I Ching looked around, turned around, walked to the side and squatted down. There seems to be a way to break through here. The 2 were shocked and immediately surrounded it. Sure enough, there seemed to be some pattern engraved on the side. Because they were on the ground, Jing Qi had not noticed it before. Because of the age, the handwriting was no longer clear. Only the pattern on the top could be seen clearly. There were 3 people whose faces could not be seen clearly, but they could vaguely guess that they were 2 men and 1 woman. One had a sword, one had a flute in his hand, and the last one was holding something that they could not see clearly. Could it be that this demonic Qi really needs 3 people to work together to break through? Jing Qi's eyes lit up, and he turned to look at the 2. Why don't the 3 of us work together? and attack this demonic chi barrier. Okay. Lily nodded. I Ching was silent for a while, and also nodded. Only then did the three of them take a step forward. Circulating their spiritual energy, they attacked the thick demonic energy together. The demonic energy barrier twisted and began to shake. Finally, there was some movement. Jing Qi was overjoyed. He urged everyone to use their full strength. It's about to open. They had to mobilize more spirit qi again. But this time, it was like a clay ox entering the sea, and there was not much reaction. I Ching frowned, and with a thought, he directly changed the spirit qi into sword qi to attack the demonic qi. Suddenly, the demonic qi barrier seemed to be cut by something, and instantly a hole appeared. Jing Qi's eyes narrowed, and he suddenly retracted his hand. Before the two of them could react, his figure flashed and rushed into the hole. Brother Dog. Lily was shocked, and before she could react, the figure of the other party was already gone. Only then did she realize that she had been cheated, and instantly her face turned red with anger. He is too much, and he said he wanted to go in together. Sure enough, he was the same as when he was young, only knowing how to bully other children. I Ching looked at the closed entrance and did not speak. He just changed the sword move in his hand, and in an instant, thousands of sword qi shot directly towards the demonic qi in front of him. In the next moment, the demonic qi seemed to have met some natural enemy, and began to dissipate inch by inch. In a short while, the entire demonic qi barrier disappeared. Go in, I Ching said and turned to walk in. Lily was stunned, and then followed in. If they had known that Brother I Ching could do it alone, why did they have to do it just now? For some reason, he suddenly wanted to see Brother Dog's expression. As Lily expected, when Brother Dog saw the two of them walking towards him, he had a look of exasperation. He thought that they would come in sooner or later, but he didn't think it would be so soon. They were just a few steps behind him. I was going to try to break the demonic aura from the inside, but I didn't expect you guys to already be here. He smiled, as if he did not want to clash with them, and subconsciously pressed his hand on his storage bag. The two of them obviously didn't believe him. Humph! Lily was young, so she directly snorted at him, and was about to say something. I Ching suddenly spoke. Where's the exit? It was as if he had already guessed that Lone Moon would rush in first, but completely ignored him. Jing Qi's face darkened. It was that expression again. It was as if he didn't see him in his eyes at all. He clenched his fists tightly by his side. He didn't think that his choice just now was wrong. In this world, the strong were respected. He was just grasping the opportunity at the right time. However, when he saw how nonchalant the other party was, he couldn't help but feel angry. He felt sullen, as if he was being looked down on by someone standing at the top. They were clearly from the same village. What right did he have to look at him like this? This should be the center of this mystic realm. There must be an exit to return to the surface. Seeing that the other party didn't answer, I Ching didn't care and continued. This mansion isn't big. Let's split up and search. With that said, he glanced at Lily, turned around and chose a direction to go. Lily nodded, and also went in a direction to find the exit. Before she left, she even snorted loudly in Jing Qi's direction. Jing Qi's face darkened. His hands moved, and he also chose a direction to look for other opportunities. She was just a girl who hadn't reached foundation establishment. He didn't care about her. He subconsciously touched his storage bag. When he got out, he wouldn't need much. He would make these people who looked down on him pay the price. Although this mansion didn't look big, there were countless rooms. There were also many holes in the ground floor, and because of the long years, the things inside had been weathered, leaving only a thick layer of dust. The few of them searched inside for several hours, but they didn't find anything at all, let alone the exit, until I Ching's voice suddenly sounded, "Lower right, come here." The other two who were searching were stunned, and then rushed over. They rushed towards the room that I Ching mentioned. The two arrived at almost the same time. Once they entered the room, they saw a white light in front of them. There was an array in the room. It looked like it had just been activated by the wind. It should have been triggered when I Ching came in. This was the innermost and largest room in this ancient relic. The surrounding walls were engraved with traces of other array formations. But only the array formation with white light in front seemed to be activated. The white light was very gentle, without any murderous aura. Anyway, there was a kind of gentle and calm aura. And they couldn't tell what it was for. There should be a way out of here, I Ching said, then turned to look at the surrounding array formations that had failed. It was just that he didn't have a deep understanding of array formations, so he couldn't tell what those arrays were for. Lily was a pill cultivator, and she was also at the qi refinement stage, so she couldn't see anything. Instead, Jingqi took 2 steps forward. He didn't intend to study the array formation, but for some reason, his feet suddenly lit up, as if he had touched something. The bright array formation in front of him shone brightly with white light, sweeping towards everyone. Jingqi was shocked. He quickly stepped back and hurriedly summoned his spirit sword. Before he left the room, a deep male voice suddenly sounded in the room. The fated person who obtained my essence restoring pearl. Suddenly, a translucent snow-white figure appeared in the room. It looked like a middle-aged man with a smile on his lips. He was looking straight in the direction of the door. It's an illusion, I Ching said in a low voice. It should be an image left by the owner of this relic when he was alive. Sure enough, in less than a moment, the figure continued to speak in a low voice. This noble one is called Yu Shui. I am the leader of the demon realm, the king of demons. King of demons? The few of them took a deep breath. They didn't expect that this mystic realm was actually built by the demon clan. I have cultivated for thousands of years, and was fortunate enough to become the king of demons. This is the only one in the demon realm. It was all because I was fortunate enough to meet a noble person who connected the 2 realms of humans and demons with his omnipotent ability. This allowed the sect and the demon clan to eliminate the estrangement and live in harmony for 10,000 years. With the help of the Great Tao, there were countless people in both the human and demon realms who ascended and became immortals. Since then, the demon clan was able to create the real Tao-seeking method. Chapter 326. Today, I'm about to ascend to the immortal world. Remembering the bloodthirsty nature of the demons in my race, I'm afraid that the 2 races will once again become enemies and lose the right path of the Great Tao. Using the origin returning pearl as a contract, I hope that the fated person will obtain it and pass it on to my descendants. Remember that life and death are all karma. Getting rid of the murderous heart and jumping out of one's nature is the path of immortal ascension. As soon as he finished speaking, the illusion became fainter and fainter. There seemed to be golden light shining on him from all directions, and the voice became even fainter. I hope that I can see Great Immortal again in my life, and thank her for enlightening my race. In the next moment, the phantom completely disappeared, and even the flashing white array formation dimmed. It was as if it had never appeared. Lily summoned a fireball and lit up the room again. She looked confused. That illusion just now, what did it mean? She was a little confused, but she vaguely guessed that this should be the place where the demon race used to live. But the other party ascended, so he left this place behind. I Ching shook his head. He didn't hear it very clearly either. That illusion must have been talking about something that happened a long time ago. He was a little surprised that there was a time when humans and demons actually lived in harmony. By right, demons loved to eat humans and were untamable. The cultivators were all mortals in the past, so when the 2 races met, it had always been a life and death battle. Either the humans were eaten by the demons, or the demons were killed, and their inner cores were taken out. Other than that, there was no other way. Only the demon king guarding the mountain and honesty sect had no choice but to submit because of the blood contract. Aren't we looking for a way out? Jingqi suddenly reminded, breaking the 2's thoughts. Let's hurry and find what else is here. A hint of nervousness flashed across his face. He started to look around, afraid that if the 2 continued thinking, they would ask about the origin returning pearl sooner or later. He subconsciously touched the storage bag beside him. It turned out that the pearl he saw flying around when he rushed in was actually a treasure left behind by a mighty cultivator who was about to ascend. He suddenly felt excited. As long as he could get out, his cultivation would definitely increase by another level. He might even have the possibility of forming his core. The two came back to their senses. They really didn't continue thinking about the illusion, and were about to look around carefully. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the sound of something falling could be heard. There were even bricks and tiles falling from above. This place is about to collapse. Get out! I Ching reminded and flew up on his sword. The other two reacted as well. One after another, they used their mounts to rush out. Their surroundings were collapsing even faster. Several times they were almost smashed. It was not easy for them to fly out. When he turned around, he saw that the entire mansion had been turned into ruins, and the ground was shaking nonstop. Look, something is rising from the ground. Lily pointed to the center and exclaimed. The two of them looked over. Sure enough, something was slowly protruding from the middle of the ruins. Suddenly, something was breaking out of the ground. Not long after, the surrounding bricks and tiles fell, and a huge stone statue suddenly rose from the ground. The stone statue was very tall, even wider than the ruins that had just collapsed. It slowly rose higher and higher, until it reached the top of the pitch-black sky. At this time, the upper half of the stone statue appeared in front of the giant. It was a woman, and in her hand was a round, fruit-like artifact. He narrowed his eyes, and that face. Why do I find him a little familiar? Lily was stunned. Jingqi was also shocked. This isn't. He reflexively turned to look at I Ching beside him, only to see that he was completely stunned. He stared straight at the stone statue in front of him with wide eyes. After a while he murmured, Master? Jingqi's face darkened. This stone statue was the woman with the surname Shun, who had eaten at I Ching's house. She was also the master who later took him in as a disciple. But why would her stone statue appear in this mystic realm, and in the mansion of the owner of the ruins? He suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. He could not understand the person beside him anymore. Looking at the other's stunned look, he could not help but say sarcastically, that master of yours still has a lot of secrets. It seems that your master-disciple relationship is nothing more than this. I Ching's expression changed. He turned to look over, and his eyes instantly turned as cold as ice. An overwhelming sword chi directly rushed toward the other party. Jingqi's eyes widened suddenly, and his heart suddenly stopped. His whole body felt like it had fallen into an ice cave. All the meridians in his body seemed to be frozen in an instant, as if he would die in the next moment. There's an exit up there. Lily, who was beside him, suddenly exclaimed and pointed to the top of the stone statue. The stone statue rose up and directly pushed away the black wind blades above, as well as the swamp that seemed to have a life of its own. They could get out by following the direction of the stone statue. I Ching then turned to look up and said in a low voice, Let's go. He directly turned and flew up, and Lily immediately followed. Jingqi took 2 deep breaths, and pressed on the position of his chest. He then looked at I Ching, who was not far away. It must have been an illusion just now. I Ching was only a foundation establishment cultivator. How could he have such a terrifying sword aura? His face darkened, and he felt a little dazed just now. Only then did he follow out, because the statue directly pushed away the layer of swamp. The few of them flew out smoothly, and were no longer entangled. Little Uncle Master. As soon as he flew out, the disciples who had been waiting in the air for a day immediately surrounded him. There were even some younger disciples who couldn't control themselves and burst into tears. Little Uncle Master, wow, you really came out. We were all scared to death. Yes, Little Uncle Master, you don't even know that we burned the incense. If you didn't come out in a moment, we would have rushed in. Little Uncle Master, wow. That's great, Little Uncle Master. I'm not dreaming, right? You're really alive. Little Junior Brother, don't cry. Your snot is going to rub on it. Sob, 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 I'm happy. I Ching still had that cold and serious look on his face. He frowned and took a few steps back, staying further away from the disciple with a runny nose. He turned to look at the incense stick on the ground that was about to burn out and asked, Is everyone here? The disciples nodded. They're all here, no one is missing. There were also a few Danqing sect disciples at the scene, surrounding Lily to check on her. They might have rushed over, because of the previous distress signal. For a moment, only Jing-Qi's side was empty. There was not a single person there. He glanced at I Ching, who was surrounded by the disciples, and his expression became even more sinister. He snorted coldly and flew away without saying anything. The others did not notice at all. Maybe no one cared. Instead, a few senior sisters from Lily's side came over and thanked I Ching solemnly. I Ching nodded and did not say much. It was just a small effort. He would take it as a return to Grandma Wang for taking care of him back then. After calculating the time, he led the disciples and flew in the direction of the Mystic Realm's exit. But his frown did not loosen. There seemed to be something between his brows. Master. Chapter 327. In this trip to the Mystic Realm, Honesty Sect achieved unprecedented success. It was different from other sects who gained a lot of spirit herbs and resources. The disciples of Honesty Sect brought back a pile of demon cores. Lu Hong looked at the mountain-like demon cores handed over by the disciples, and his mouth twitched. He had the illusion that his own disciples cleared the mystic realm of all demon beasts. After checking the demon cores, and making sure there was no aura harmful to cultivation, he waved his hand, and asked the disciples to keep the demon cores. I Ching was indeed the disciple of a supremacy. The number of demon beasts his team gained was more than all the disciples who went in for training over the years. It was even more than 10 times that of his adult son Lu Tao's team. Lu Tao was very sad about this. He wanted to pick up demon cores with little Uncle Master, but his father insisted that he lead another team. They already got a lot of demon cores this time, okay? He was not the first hero but the second. Lu Tao was a little upset. What made him even more upset was, after the disciples who followed Little Uncle Master's team came back, most of their cultivation actually increased. Even those who did not, their swordsmanship improved a lot. Little Uncle Master even formed his core directly. So, Lu Hong turned around and locked his son in the sword array without a word. Look at him. To I Ching, forming a core was no different from meditating and drawing qi into his body. There was not even a lightning bolt, and his golden core was formed. But Lone Moon casually attracted a few bolts of lightning beside him, saying that it was just for show, and also to tell everyone that he formed his core. He looked at the golden core inside his body, and suddenly a feeling of uncertainty arose in his heart. He frowned, as if thinking of something, and a look of confusion flashed across his face. So that night, Shunning looked at the person beside the bed and sighed deeply. Sending supper? Shaking his head. Sending drinks. Still shaking his head. Sending fruits. Still shaking his head. Trying out new dishes? Still shaking his head. Oh! Shunning pulled the blanket and lay down again, continuing to sleep. 10 minutes later, the blanket was lifted, and Shunning sat up directly. Chef, Master, I really can't sleep with you staring at me like this. What is it? Can you just say it? I Ching's expression darkened, and he lowered his head slightly. Something flashed across his eyes, and he took a step forward. His eyes seemed to hide a vast ocean. After hesitating for a while, he asked, Master, back then, why did you accept me as your disciple? Huh? Shunning turned around and blurted out, You know how to cook. Was that so hard to understand? It was an expected answer, but I Ching still felt relieved. He stepped forward and asked anxiously, What else? That's it. Disciples and whatnot were very troublesome. Is that so? His face darkened. Is there anything else? She really wanted to sleep. The turbulence in I Ching's eyes slowly calmed down. He focused on the person in front of him. A moment later, the corners of his mouth lifted to reveal a smile. That's all. Actually, I haven't seen Master for a whole month. I'm worried about how Master is doing these days, so I came to see. Oh. Shunning tilted her head and looked at the young man in front of her. Her expression darkened. So you stared at me for 3 nights? I Ching was stunned. He sat down on the edge of her bed. His expression darkened. If I don't see Master, I can't be at ease. He felt as if she would disappear in the blink of an eye. His expression softened. Then he added, And Master often kicks the blanket in the middle of the night. I. His expression was conflicted. It was obvious that he wanted to say something, but he couldn't say it. It made people want to bully him for no reason. Shen Ying's expression darkened. The urge to bully a little child emerged in her heart once again. Suddenly, she leaned forward towards the person beside the bed. She was so close that she was almost touching him. I say, little chef, do you know that it's very dangerous to run to the bed of an older single woman in the middle of the night? Shen Ying's sudden approach startled Lone Moon. Her warm voice swept across his face. Instantly, he felt his face heating up. His heartbeat quickened. His eyes widened as he subconsciously replied. What? Danger? You want to know? Shen Ying leaned even closer to him. She stared at his entire face, which was dyed red. Think about it. Oh. Shen Ying suddenly reached out and pulled his collar forward. Then, with a flip of her body, she threw the person in front of her onto the bed. She turned around and pressed on top of him. She sat on top of him. Who asked you to send yourself to me? With a swoosh, she pulled open the clothes in front of his chest and pressed one hand against his burning chest. Her eyes narrowed into a line. She smiled like a big bad wolf. There's a danger of losing your virginity. I Ching's entire body froze. His mouth was slightly agape as he looked at the person in front of him. He couldn't react for a long time, until Shen Ying's hand slid down from his chest. With an evil smile, she slowly moved to the belt at the side of his waist. He trembled. Subconsciously, he grabbed her hand. Shen Ying didn't move again. She just narrowed her eyes and looked at him. Master. What? I changed my mind. I want to go back to sleep. No. I often heard people say that I'm a human cauldron that Master has been raising since I was young. I didn't believe it in the past. But now, it's really? What? No matter what Master does, disciple is willing. It's just that I've never learned it, disciple doesn't know how. Master, my heart is beating so fast. Is this normal? Master, human cauldron. How do you do it? She looked at the person in front of her. His face was pure and sincere. He was looking at her with trust. Shen Ying felt that her conscience was being hit hard. Each hit was heavier than the last. Instantly, all the mischievous thoughts that had accumulated in her heart, and the half a bit of eagerness to try it out, were all gone. Suddenly, she remembered that the person under her was still a 16-year-old young man. The heart of the old auntie, who teased fresh meat, was broken. She completely could not do it. The corner of her mouth twitched. She turned and rolled to the bottom of the wall. Her back was facing the person behind her. She even purposely arched her body like a shrimp. She arched a certain someone outwards. Her entire person was exuding a decadent aura. Master. Sleep. Oh. A while later. Master. A careful voice. Have you finished plucking? Actually, she felt that something was wrong. Shut up. Oh. Another while later. Master? An even more careful voice. Actually, I can still take it. Why don't you pluck again? Scram. Shen Ying couldn't take it anymore. She kicked the person on the bed off. Chef, who had lost his memory, wasn't cute at all. Chapter 328. He didn't know how Lone Moon fooled them, but more and more Divine Heaven's sect disciples came to Honesty Sect, and all of them were sword cultivators who came to challenge the sword array. Honesty Sect received so many spirit stones that their hands were sore, and it was more than 10 times more expensive than the spirit stones used to enter the mystic realm. Lu Hong was confused about this, and didn't even know when Lone Moon and the Divine Heaven's sect master agreed on this. Why did every Divine Heaven's sect disciple look like they got a great deal, when they clearly paid a huge price to enter the sword array that disciples could enter at will? Besides, although Supremacy Lone Moon's sword array was exquisite, other sects had it, not to mention a big sect like Divine Heaven's sect. The only advantage was that even nascent soul cultivators could enter the sword array. Lu Hong was full of doubts, until the sect welcomed the first batch of nascent soul cultivators. The spirit stones each cultivator brought made him even more speechless, almost as much as Honesty Sect's income in half a year. He couldn't help but ask. Oh, Lone Moon answered matter-of-factly. I told them that within 3 years, other than our sect, Only Divine Heaven's sect's nascent soul cultivators can enter the sword array. The premium exclusive membership price was, of course, more expensive. Lu Hong. So that was it. It didn't matter if their own sect didn't have many nascent soul cultivators. But there were many in the three azure realms. But it was extremely difficult to ascend to the soul formation stage. 9 out of 10 failed. Mainly because they lacked the opportunity to ascend. It was very difficult to find a place to train. So a sword array that could allow nascent soul cultivators to enter would naturally attract the attention of various sections. The earlier they entered, the earlier they had the chance to ascend. As the number one immortal sect, Divine Heaven's sect was naturally willing to have a few more soul formation cultivators, and the sooner the better. The sooner they became the number one immortal sect, the more stable their position would be. Naturally, they were willing to pay any price. And their honesty sect gave Divine Heaven's sect so much convenience. Presumably, the relationship between the two sects would be different in the future, and it would be more beneficial to honesty sect. As expected of a soul formation supremacy, he had already thought so far ahead. As the sect master, he was really ashamed. Supremacy, you are really far-sighted. He cupped his fists and bowed seriously, having the urge to throw out the position of sect master for the umpteenth time. Lone Moon, who only wanted to raise the price, so he pulled a living signboard. Reality proved that Lone Moon's sword array was indeed very useful. In just a few years, the cultivation of the disciples in the sect had reached a new level. There were even some disciples who were originally at the golden core stage, who successfully formed their nascent souls. Wu Wang was no longer a sect that only had 2 nascent soul cultivators. It was the same for the people from Divine Heaven's sect, especially the few nascent soul cultivators. After coming out of the array, although they didn't directly advance to the soul formation stage, the cultivators who hadn't moved for many years had more or less loosened up. Everyone was pleasantly surprised, and they were even more generous with their spirit stones. Some even took the initiative to increase the price. Honesty sect's treasury was filled up at a visible speed, and they were completely out of poverty. To this, Lone Moon felt that it was too boring to farm low-level instance dungeons. After handing everything over to Lu Hong, he didn't care anymore, and focused on watching I Ching's cultivation. He was determined to prevent Shen Ying from pulling him astray to become a body cultivator. This went on for 3 years. Since returning from that mystic realm, I Ching didn't know what stimulated him, but he became more and more diligent in his cultivation. His set of sword techniques became more and more perfect. His original cultivation was there, and he just lacked the recovery of spirit power. Once he got serious, his cultivation rose even more. In less than 3 years, he directly reached the golden core stage and was about to form his nascent soul. Lone Moon could only stop him. How long had he been cultivating? In less than 6 years he formed his core. He could still explain that he had an epiphany in the mystic realm, but to form his nascent soul in less than 10 years was too scary. Although they weren't afraid of others coveting him, he hadn't recovered his previous memories after all. If he jumped too fast, something would really happen to his body. Then all their efforts would be in vain. To this, I Ching didn't say anything. Stuck at the half-step nascent soul stage, he really stopped when he said so. What? Sect competition? Lone Moon glanced at Lu Hong, who was smiling confidently. That's right. Lu Hong nodded and said, there is a sect competition in the 3 azure realms every 10 years, and each sect takes turns to host it. In recent years, the disciples in the sect have been quite active in cultivating. It's a good thing to be able to participate in the competition. Yes, then let's go. Why tell him? But Lu Hong looked troubled. Looking at Lone Moon's expression, he gritted his teeth and said, the sect competition this time, the various sects suggested, to be held in our sect. What? Lone Moon glanced at him. It was written all over his face that if he wanted to hold it here, would they pay? Lu Hong wiped his cold sweat. In the past, the sect competition was always held in first-class sects like Divine Heaven's sect and Mystic Essence sect. I don't know why, but this time they want to hold it here? Although in recent years, especially after Supremacy Lone Moon came, Honesty Sect's financial strength had improved, especially in terms of financial strength, but ultimately, Immortal Sect's valued strength. Honesty Sect only had 2 soul formation supremacies, so it naturally couldn't be counted as a first-class sect. What do you think? Lone Moon frowned. Hosting the sect's grand ceremony is an important thing to raise the sect's status, and it's just providing a venue for the competition. I think it's worth a try. Lu Hong nodded and said, since you've already settled it, you can arrange it. Lone Moon nodded. Thinking of something, he added, oh yes, from tomorrow onwards, the sword array will be temporarily sealed. Just tell those Divine Heavens Sect nascent soul cultivators that it's for the preparation for the competition. Lu Hong's eyes brightened, and he instantly understood something. He nodded hard. Lu Hong understands. Pushing the sect competition to a mid-tier sect, anyone could guess that all the sects had their own reasons. And the only thing that could make people think about Honesty Sect was that sword array. Yet in these 3 years, they only accepted Divine Heavens Sect disciples into the array. The other sects probably heard the news long ago and wanted to take advantage of the sect competition to find out more about the void, and also to send their disciples to try it out. Even Divine Heavens Sect probably didn't know about this, so the other sects directly informed Lu Hong. That was why Lone Moon closed the sword array and let the Divine Heavens Sect cultivators go back to report. But to Honesty Sect, this really wasn't a loss. Back then, Lone Moon had promised 3 years. Now that the time limit had passed, in theory, it wouldn't matter if other sects went. But the key was that the number of people entering the sword array was limited. If other sects entered, then Divine Heavens Sect's people would correspondingly decrease. It would be strange if they weren't anxious. So in order to get a few more places, Divine Heavens Sect would naturally do their best to help in this sect competition, so that they could get a few more places to enter the array. And Honesty Sect just had to lie down and earn money. Chapter 329. Oh yes, about the name list of the disciples participating in the competition. Lu Hong's eyes brightened, and he said expectantly, the Qi Refinement and Foundation Establishment disciples are easy to arrange, but the Golden Core disciples are a bit difficult. You want I Ching to participate? Lone Moon was shocked, and instantly guessed what he meant. Lu Zhang smiled and nodded and said excitedly, I Ching is the disciple of 2 supremacies. He is very talented, and in the mystic realm, he even directly comprehended the core formation. I think he can definitely help our sect to obtain the Golden Core. No. Before he finished, Lone Moon rejected him instantly. He doesn't need to prove anything at all. He won't participate in any competition. He knew I Ching's current cultivation best. He was already half a step away from nascent soul. If he participated in another competition, with his little cheat's attributes, it was possible for him to directly reach soul formation instead of nascent soul. Supremacy. Lu Hong didn't expect him to reject him. After all, this was the best chance to become famous in one battle. He was stunned, and subconsciously retorted, but in my sect there is. Lu Hong. Lone Moon's face darkened. We joined Honesty Sect, and naturally we will help the sect in all aspects. So we will do whatever we can. But as for I Ching, please remember, he is only Xin Ying's disciple, that's all. No matter who it is, it's best not to have any other thoughts otherwise. Looking at him, he said word by word in a stern tone that he had never used before. When some people come for Real, you can't afford it. Lu Hong stiffened, and a chill rose from the bottom of his heart. His whole body instantly felt cold. Lone Moon didn't say much, but just patted him on the shoulder and turned to leave. Lone Moon was right. After he removed the sword array, in less than 2 days, Divine Essence Sect sent a large group of disciples over, saying that they would help Honesty Sect organize the sect competition, and they brought their own Dharma artifacts and all kinds of equipment. Another floating peak was raised outside the sect, and all kinds of competition venues were built on it, as well as residences for disciples. Even without Lu Hong's mention, the other party took the initiative to find him, and explained all the matters and precautions of the competition in detail. Putting aside the money and effort, the level of enthusiasm made it seem as if the one hosting the competition was the Divine Heavens sect, and not Honesty sect. When it was time for the sect competition, the sect leader of Divine Heavens sect, Dongwu, even personally led the team and brought all the disciples, which was a great show of respect to Honesty sect. Many people from the various sects had come as well. It was about the same as what he had guessed. Sure enough, their purpose for coming here was not just the tournament. In less than 2 days, almost half of the sect leaders had asked him about the sword formation, either explicitly or implicitly. After all, he had been the sect leader for so many years. Lu Hong did not agree, nor did he refuse. He just beat around the bush. Regarding big matters like earning spirit stones, he felt that he had to ask Supremacy Lone Moon first, before he could be at ease. It was clearly a sect competition, but no one was paying attention to the competition. This gave Honesty sect, who had prepared for a long time, an advantage. Quite a number of disciples achieved good results, especially the Foundation Establishment disciples. Lu Tao had made it all the way to the finals. Since Lone Moon said that he would not interfere, he really did not interfere. He stayed at the Invincible Peak for a few days, until the last day of the competition, when all the sects were fighting for the top spot. He then took Shining and I Ching out for a walk. After all, they were the only 2 soul formation supremacies in the sect. It was indeed inappropriate for them not to show up for such a big event. Once the 3 of them arrived, the sect leaders who had arrived earlier on the backstage all stood up. Perhaps because they had already heard that the sword formation was set up by Lone Moon, they were especially warm to him. Lone Moon was especially familiar with such occasions. Just walking to the grandstand, he had cheated countless people. Then he smiled and sat on the right side. Next to him was Dongwu of Divine Heavens sect. The 2 of them chatted about something, but seeing Father Nio's sly smile, Shining silently lit a candle for him. Not long after they sat down, the competition had already started. Lone Moon had to stop talking. Looking at the arena, the Chi Refinement Group's competition was in front. It was a man and a woman fighting against each other. They were disciples of Red and Green sect and Mystic Essence sect. They looked young, especially the female cultivator. Her bone age looked to be less than 16 years old. Lone Moon frowned. Somehow, she looked familiar, but he could not remember where he had seen her before. The Chi Refinement Group's competition ended very quickly. The female cultivator from Red and Green sect used an explosive elixir to blow her opponent off the stage and won. Perhaps it was a coincidence, but the sect leader of Red and Green sect was sitting not far from them. The moment the female cultivator got off the stage, she walked towards I Ching happily. Before she reached the Green Pill sect's position, her eyes suddenly lit up, and she looked straight in I Ching's direction. Her eyes seemed to be blooming with flowers. Her young face was filled with excitement and a trace of lingering affection. Lone Moon's heart lit up. He suddenly remembered who this woman was. Wasn't she the little girl who came out of the mystic realm with I Ching? He heard from the disciples that she was his childhood sweetheart, and I Ching even saved her in the mystic realm. So from the looks of this girl, she was his childhood sweetheart, and he had saved her life. Was she going to repay him with her body? Lone Moon felt excited for no reason. He nudged Shining beside him and said gloatingly, "Hey Shining, do you see that girl?" He pointed to the girl on the right and said meaningfully, "Looks like you have a love rival." Ah. Shen Ying's hand that was nibbling on her fruit slipped. She looked stunned. "Hurry up and tell me, what do you think?" Shen Ying tilted her head and looked in the direction he was pointing. Then, she turned back to look at Chef, who looked normal. What? Lone Moon rolled his eyes. "I didn't expect Chef to be so charming. That girl obviously likes Chef." "Is that so?" Shen Ying was stunned. She looked at the 2 of them again, as if trying to figure out the truth of his words. She did not look jealous at all. Chef, on the other hand, was stunned. He stepped forward and looked at the 2 of them who were whispering to each other. "Master, what's wrong? Why are you whispering to each other without me?" He subconsciously turned to look in the direction she was looking at. He saw a girl dressed in pink. She looked familiar. That girl's eyes lit up even more. Her face turned even redder. She looked even more excited. She clenched her fists by her side. As if she could not help it, she walked over excitedly. Look, she's coming. She's here to snatch people. Lone Moon looked like he was watching a good show. The girl got closer and closer. The more she walked, the more anxious she became. Towards the end, she was even jogging. Her smile was especially bright. She seemed to be flying over impatiently, heading straight in I Ching's direction. Then she pushed I Ching away and hugged Shining, who was behind him. Shining. Lone Moon. I Ching. Chapter 330. Big sister, it's really you, isn't it? She was so emotional that she looked like she was about to cry. She hugged Shining tightly, and even rubbed her chest. I knew I would be able to see you again. What the hell? Lily. I Ching, who was suddenly pushed away and almost fell to the ground, frowned, and went forward to separate the two. Don't be rude to Master. Lily was stunned, as if she just noticed I Ching. Big brother next door, why are you here? I Ching pulled his master back with a look of dissatisfaction. I am Master's disciple, of course I'm here. Why are you hugging? What if you hurt yourself? Master? She looked at I Ching and then at Shining, with a look of disbelief. She seemed to have figured something out, and her face fell. You actually became the disciple of the little sister who saved me. She looked at I Ching inexplicably with some hostility. She turned to Shining with tears in her eyes. Big sister, do you still remember me? I am Nyo Nyo, the Nyo Nyo that you saved back then. You are the reason why I am cultivating immortality. Shining tilted her head, looking confused. I am the granddaughter of I Ching's next-door neighbor, Granny Wang. Lily did not give up and continued. Back then, we were almost eaten by the tiger demon. You saved him and me together. I miss you so much, I miss you so much. Oh, Shining nodded. Who was Granny Wang? Lily looked excited. I fainted back then, so I didn't have time to talk to big sister. Now I finally see you again. I have always wanted to ask you. She could not help but hold her hand again and said sincerely. Big sister, do you still lack disciples? I Ching. Lone Moon. The sect master of Red and Green sect who had just followed. Hey, do you want to join another sect in front of your own master? There's no need. I Ching's face darkened. He could not help but pull her hand away again, and even wiped it on Xin Ying's hand. He said word by word. My master has no plans to accept any more disciples. Big brother next door, you are too stingy. Let me be your junior sister. I will definitely be very obedient. No need. She was resolute. Humph. It's not like you're the one accepting the disciple. What right do you have to say no? No means no. Look at you, you're just a selfish bully. I still want to acknowledge you as my master. How dare you? Sword chi filled the air. Humph. Are you and I afraid of you? Give it a try. He drew his sword. Lone Moon was speechless as he watched the two of them about to start fighting. They looked at each other as if they were thieves. It was supposed to be Shen Ying's love rival, but it turned out to be Chef. The world changed too quickly, and he couldn't react in time. On the other hand, the sect leader of the Red and Green faction could not take it anymore. He coughed and said coldly, Lily. What? Lily was furious. She turned around and glared, only to find that the one standing behind her was her master. Instantly her momentum weakened. Master, you've just won the competition. Why are you messing around again? The other party looked at her disapprovingly with a hint of reproach. Lily looked aggrieved. After thinking for a while, she said excitedly, Master, I found the big sister who saved me back then. Look, it's her. I heard it. The sect leader of the Red and Green faction's mouth twitched. He heard it, and knew that she wanted to join another sect. But due to etiquette he could only bow. Two supremacies. Lone Moon hurriedly returned the bow. The sect leader of the Red and Green faction then turned to look at Lily. Alright, just thank her. This is the sect competition. You can't mess around like this. Follow me back. With that said, without waiting for her reply, he dragged her back awkwardly. Yet Lily did not give up. As she was being dragged, she did not forget to look at Shining affectionately. Big sister, when the competition is over, I'll come and find you. You have to wait for me. You have to wait for me. My name is Lily. Lily as in lilies. Seeing that Shenning nodded, she was dragged away by her master reluctantly. Chef's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He suddenly had the urge to bring his master back and seal up the invincible peak. He turned to look at his master worriedly, but the other party did not seem to notice and was still calmly nibbling on the fruit. I Ching's eyes darkened. Seeing that she was going to continue grabbing fruits, he frowned and snatched it over. Master, you shouldn't eat too many of these spirit fruits. Let's eat pastries. With that said, he kept the fruit on the coffee table beside her and replaced it with a plate of pastries. Oh, Shenning grabbed nothing and turned to look at the pastries. She pinched a piece unhappily and put it into her mouth after a while. The fruit was obviously more delicious. She subconsciously muttered, "You didn't care about it in the past." I Ching's hand suddenly trembled, and he clenched it tightly in his palm. In the past, Sister Lily's sudden appearance made Lo Moon lose patience to watch the competition. As for Shen Ying and I Ching, they were not watching at all. They only vaguely heard that Lu Hong's son seemed to have gotten second place in the Foundation Establishment group, which was considered a good result. When the Golden Core stage ended, he saw that the winner was actually Jing Qi. Speaking of which, he had not seen this invader for several years. The last time was when he entered the Mystic Realm 3 years ago. He did not expect him to form his core so quickly, and compared to that gloomy time, he looked much better now, as if he could finally hold his head up high, and his whole person was brimming with confidence. But for some reason, the luck in the virtual shadow surrounding him had decreased a lot. He also did not know what happened in the Mystic Realm last time. It was said that he was also a dual cultivator of sword and pill. His sword moves were fast and quick, and he defeated his opponent cleanly, causing an uproar among the sections. Even the Divine Heaven sect master, who was not on good terms with Wu Xiang, praised him. The judge was just about to announce that he was the winner of the Golden Core stage and in today's competition. Wait, but he stopped him. Instead, he suddenly took a few steps forward and cupped his fists at the various sect masters on the spectator stand. He said loudly, "In this competition, there are even more powerful Golden Core cultivators who did not participate. This disciple naturally does not dare to take the title of champion." As he spoke, he suddenly turned to look at I Ching. A trace of resentment flashed across his eyes, but it immediately darkened again. He continued, "I heard that fellow Taoist I Ching of Honesty sect has excellent swordsmanship. When he was in the Golden Core stage, he broke through the sect's nascent soul stage sword array. Unfortunately, I do not know why he did not participate in the competition today. So I would like to fight with fellow Taoist I Ching." As soon as he finished speaking, the various sect masters all turned to look in I Ching's direction. There was more or less a look of anticipation in their eyes. Originally, they came for the sword array in this competition, but they heard that Honesty sect had sealed the sword array in advance, so they could not find out more about it. Suddenly, a provocation came out, and the other party was someone who had broken through 10 levels of the sword array. Wasn't it exactly what they wanted? How could it not make him excited? Chapter 331. Divine Heaven's sect master Dong Wu's face darkened. Others might not know the effect of the sword array, but he was very clear about it. The few cultivators in the sect who were about to break through to soul formation were proof. He wished that other sects didn't know what it was, so that they wouldn't have to steal their spots. He didn't expect a fool to appear in his own sect. "Jing Qi, shut up, don't be rude." He wanted to stop him from continuing. Sure enough, the disciple taught by junior brother Wu Xiang was also a troublemaker. Sect master. Jing Qi had no intention of withdrawing. He still stared at I Ching and said, "His cultivation is the same as mine. If I don't compete with him, I really don't dare to bear the title of Golden Core." Dong Wu was furious, but he couldn't go down and pull him back. Instead, I Ching, who had a cold face from beginning to end, took a step forward. Just when everyone thought he would accept this challenge, I Ching suddenly said, "Whether you bear the title of Golden Core or not, what does it have to do with me?" "Jing Qi, Dongwu. Everyone. What he said made so much sense that they couldn't refute him. You. Jing Qi's face turned red with anger. He suddenly felt like he was being humiliated in public. Are you looking down on me? I Ching was stunned. He replied, why should I look up to you? Who are you? I don't even know you. Jing Qi instantly spat out a mouthful of blood. He wanted to spit it on Loman's face. Even the onlookers were a little sympathetic for him. This answer was so reasonable that it made people want to vomit blood. Seeing that Jing Qi looked like he was about to faint from anger, Shening, who had already eaten half a plate of pastries, narrowed her eyes. Huh. She suddenly turned her head and said, Chef, go and try. I Ching was stunned, and then nodded. Yes, master. With that said, his figure flashed, and he was already on the competition stage. With a turn of his hand, a snow-white spirit sword appeared in his hand. Jing Qi's eyes darkened. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He laughed coldly. He finally came down. From the looks of it, he should have formed his core as well. But it didn't matter. Today, he must take revenge for what happened before. The two did not say anything more, and directly fought together. For a moment, the whole place was filled with sword lights. The two of them moved so fast that only their afterimages could be seen from time to time. Everyone released their divine sense one after another. Only then did they see the two's movements clearly. Both of their sword techniques were astonishing. Their sword moves were ever-changing. He did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that their moves were somewhat similar. However, I Ching's sword moves seemed to be more exquisite. In the beginning, Jing Qi was still able to fight evenly with him. However, as the fight went on, Jing Qi became more and more exhausted. There were even a few times when he was unable to dodge his opponent's moves, and was directly swept by the sword light. If not for the Dharma robes he was wearing, the competition would have been over. The more Jing Qi fought, the more shocked he became. He did not expect I Ching's sword technique to be so powerful. Even though he had received the inheritance from the essence-converting ball, he still could not defeat him. Was this the sword technique that his master had taught him? The more he thought about it, the more hatred he felt. If it wasn't for him, he would have had the chance to learn such an exquisite sword technique. How could she be accepted as a disciple by that ungrateful old man Wu Xiang? He was indeed his nemesis. If he didn't get rid of him now, he would be an even bigger obstacle to his cultivation in the future. Hardening his heart, he gritted his teeth and dodged his opponent's attack. Seeing that thousands of sword chi were about to hit him, he changed his hand seal. He calmed his heart and pulled out a trace of his consciousness to connect with the essence returning pearl in his arms. In an instant, an endless stream of energy flowed out from the pearl. The spirit chi in his body surged and instantly bounced back the attacking sword chi. It even forced I Ching to take 2 steps back. A suppressive force that was even stronger than that of a soul formation cultivator attacked I Ching. Thousands of spirit swords appeared and attacked I Ching. Every sword seemed to be alive. Wind, fire, thunder, and lightning even appeared on the swords. I Ching dodged, but did not have time to dodge. In an instant his body was cut by many wounds. Especially that special suppressive force. It made it even more difficult for him to move. He could not even move a step. 5 elemental lightning fire array. As there was an isolation array around the spectator stand, the crowd did not feel that suppressive force. But they recognized that array. Their eyes were filled with surprise. That was an array that even nascent soul cultivators might not be able to master. Jing Qi could actually summon it and control it so freely. This kind of talent could be considered one of a kind in the 3 azure realms. I Ching could only surround himself with sword chi to block the omnipresent spirit swords. But the suppressive force was even more severe. He felt suffocated, and a sweet taste of blood welled up in his mouth. He knelt down on one knee. He did not expect the other party to have this kind of strength. But this array. A trace of doubt flashed across his mind. Suddenly, he heard an ear-piercing sound behind him. Reflexively, he turned around to block it. With a crisp clang, a faint trace of gray gas flashed past his eyes. This is demonic chi? I Ching was shocked. Before he could think clearly, he suddenly heard Jing Qi's voice. Oomph. I did not expect you to be able to dodge it. But you won't be able to hold on for much longer. In the next moment, more and more of that strange aura attacked him from all directions. It carried with it a murderous aura that could not be ignored. I Ching's face darkened. He forced himself to stand up under that shocking pressure. Relying on his perception of the aura, he began to block the invisible but omnipresent aura. You're still stubbornly holding on. Jing Qi's voice became colder and colder. There was even some anger in it. Let's see how long you can hold on. With that said, the person who was originally still holding on to the array suddenly took up his sword and walked in his direction. His face was full of the pride of a victor. I Ching, from the first time I saw you, I knew that you were my biggest obstacle. You think so too, right? What? Obstacles must be eliminated. No one will know that I killed you. They will only think it was an accident. His sword was placed directly on his neck. Only when you are dead can my path to immortality be smooth. So who exactly was this person? After today, I will be the strongest golden core sword cultivator in the 3 Azure realms. In the future, I will naturally become the strongest sword immortal. Sword immortal? As for that master of yours who is proficient in swordsmanship, I will take over for you. He suddenly smiled. Master! I Ching's eyes suddenly turned cold. A faint cold aura emanated from his body. What did you say? I think she will be happy to accept an outstanding disciple like me. The more he spoke, the more pleased he became. His attacks became more and more concentrated. As long as you are dead. Shut up. Before he finished speaking, I Ching, who had not yet had the strength to resist, suddenly exploded with a huge amount of sword chi. It surged out like a tsunami. It directly repelled the surrounding spirit swords and that special aura, as well as Jing Qi directly. Chapter 332. What? Before Jing Qi could even react, his entire body smashed into the ground with a bang. The surrounding array formation instantly disappeared, and even the elemental transformation pearl in his bosom made a cracking sound as a crack appeared. How is this possible? His face was filled with disbelief, but he only felt a pain in his chest as he spat out a mouthful of blood. On the other hand, I Ching's huge sword chi shook the ground so much that it cracked inch by inch. The isolation array at the side was also directly broken. However, the sword chi around his body was still soaring. The surroundings were filled with the sound of sword light. The white sword chi surrounded him and slowly took shape. In less than a moment, it had formed a huge white dragon. The huge dragon that was like an illusion let out a dragon roar. In an instant, not only Jing Qi, but everyone on the stand heard a buzz in their ears, and they all took a breath. This is sword intent. They had never seen such a strong sword intent, like a real dragon. Everyone was shocked. Was the other party really just a golden core cultivator? I Ching just looked straight at Jing Qi, who was spitting out blood. His eyes seemed to be burning with a fire that could destroy everything. He said word by word, "Stay away from my master, little b******." As soon as he finished speaking, the huge dragon formed by the sword chi behind him opened its mouth and rushed towards the other party. Jing Qi's eyes bulged, and the fear of death hit him. He remembered all the sword techniques and spells and screamed, "Help! Help me! Holy shit, I Ching!" Lo Moon was shocked. Why did he suddenly get angry? If this sword intent kept smashing down, the invader would not even be left with ashes, not to mention alive. He could not die now. Anxious, he flew directly to the center of the field. He was just about to stop it, but someone beat him to it. Chef! Shenning suddenly appeared by his side and called out. The person who was still in a rage just now trembled, and even the huge sword chi dragon that was rushing over stopped abruptly, stopping less than a finger's distance from Jing Qi. The realistic dragon whiskers swept across the other party's face, drawing 2 bloody lines. As if frightened, his eyes rolled back and he fainted. Master! I Ching turned his head. Instantly, the violence in his eyes disappeared. He turned and hugged her. Master, don't. Ignore the other little bitches, okay? In the next moment, the sword chi around his body dissipated, along with the giant dragon, instantly dissipating. His body swayed, as if he had used up all his energy, and his whole body was on top of Shining. Chef. Chef. He's about to form his nascent soul. Lone Moon glanced at the spirit chi around Chef and frowned. That was why he was against Chef participating in the competition. Bring him back to Invincible Peak. He helped Chef up with one hand, and Shining with the other. He looked up at Lu Hong and said, Sect Master, I'll leave the rest to you. With that, he flew towards Invincible Peak on his sword. Lu Hong still hadn't recovered from the shocking sword chi just now. He only nodded his head after the others left. Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Did Supremacy Lone Moon just say, nascent soul formation? I Ching. Therefore, the sword chi just now was his epiphany. A nascent soul cultivator less than 20 years old. All the sects present thought of this, and for a moment, the whole place was silent. No one remembered the fainted Jing Qi. Once Lone Moon returned to Invincible Peak, and put I Ching on a flat ground, he hurriedly set up several lightning-attracting arrays. Golden core cultivators were still fine, but nascent soul cultivators were different. If he didn't make some noise, no one would believe that he was forming his nascent soul. Father Nio, what are you doing? Shining looked at Father Nio, who was running around in circles looking confused. Of course I'm setting up lightning-attracting arrays. Lone Moon rolled his eyes at her. Even a blind man could see that his sword chi just now didn't belong to a golden core cultivator. Therefore, we can only let him form his nascent soul as soon as possible. He knew the tricks of the immortal cultivation world the best. If I Ching had always been a golden core cultivator, that kind of sword chi would inevitably cause people to guess where it came from. They would definitely find out more. They weren't afraid of it, but they would definitely implicate Honesty Sect. They were here to take the blame anyway, and they couldn't let others take the blame. Oh. Shining nodded, took a bite of fruit and said, Does it have to be red lightning? Red? Lone Moon was stunned. What red lightning? How could there be red lightning tribulation? Like that? She pointed to the sky. Lone Moon was stunned. He looked up and saw that the sky was suddenly filled with huge thunderclouds, and red flashes of light flashed between the clouds from time to time. Holy shit. He was shocked. Why is there a lightning tribulation? Are you saying that with his cultivation, he just needs to go through the process? I don't know. Shining tilted her head. Maybe it's different this time. Different? Lone Moon was stunned. Speaking of which, the sword intent that Chef released just now was indeed different from before. In the past, his sword intent was a huge golden sword, which was cultivated by Shining after she tricked him into saying that he could defeat Tin with his strength. But what appeared just now was in the shape of a huge dragon, which looked quite like Chef's true form of the dragon race. Could it be that this was the reason why he attracted the lightning tribulation? But no matter what, there shouldn't be a red lightning tribulation. It wasn't like he had never formed a nascent soul before, and he had experienced many lightning tribulations, but he had never seen anything like this. Red lightning could only be. His face paled, and his eyes widened. He looked in Chef's direction in disbelief. Red lightning tribulation. He had only seen it in the demon realm. Why would Chef attract demonic lightning? His heart sank. He took a closer look at Chef's body. Indeed, he could see a faint trace of demonic chi. Chef didn't look right either. In the past, when he advanced, he would wake up after a nap. But now, he looked like he was in extreme pain. His forehead was covered in sweat, and his eyes were tightly shut. It was as if he was fighting with something. This was a mental demon tribulation. Holy shit, Chef actually attracted a mental demon tribulation. His eyes widened in disbelief. How could he have a mental demon? Among the three of them, the one with the purest mind was Chef. He was the kind that had a clear path to the end. By right, anyone could have a mental demon, except I Ching. Why did he get a mental demon when he came back to do a simple instance again? What's going on? Do you know what his mental demon is? Shen Ying's eyes narrowed, as if thinking of something. After a while she said, Let's wait and see. The first lightning tribulation had already struck down, directly hitting Chef's body. He was originally in extreme pain, but now he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression became even uglier. As the lightning tribulation fell one after another, his expression became more and more painful. His skin and flesh were already torn, and his breathing was already very weak. Chapter 333. No, if this goes on, Chef won't be able to get through the mental demon tribulation. They had only struck 50-odd lightning bolts. There were still 30 more to go. Oh! Shen Ying's expression darkened. Then let's pause for a while. With that said, she suddenly raised her hand and snapped her fingers in the air. In an instant, as if someone had pressed the pause button, the white lightning that struck down stopped right above Chef's head. It was as if a bright red lamp post had lit up in the sky, spanning between the heavens and the earth. Really? Teletubbies? Lone Moon? This is freaking possible. Shen Ying walked directly towards the person who was going through the tribulation. She glanced at his charred body and his pained expression. Sighing, she squatted beside him and reached out to poke the person in front of her. Chef. I Ching's expression became even uglier. After a while he slowly opened his eyes. Instantly, a pair of red eyes stared straight at her. His entire being seemed to be trapped in the mental demon, and for the first time, the way he looked at her actually had some hostility. Master. His eyes widened, and there was a hint of questioning in his voice. Who exactly am I? Who exactly do you think I am? Shen Ying paused. A strange look flashed across her eyes. Chef Dash. I'm not your chef. He suddenly roared, as if all the emotions that he had been suppressing for a long time exploded. I'm not Chef. I'm not I Ching. I don't know your past. Master. Master. Why do you always treat me as someone else? Be it you or Lone Moon. What exactly do you think of me? I really want to try my best to do everything well. I really try my best. Can you look at me? Don't look at others through me, all right? Master. You took me in as your disciple. Is it because I am me? Or because I am him? Am I just a shadow of him that you miss? But, what if I'm not him? If you're mistaken. But you are. I'm not. He roared even louder, the emotions in his eyes becoming more and more crazed. I'm not. I don't want to be someone else's substitute. I don't want you to look at him through me. I just want you to look at me, only me. Master is my. Before he could finish speaking, Shen Ying suddenly slapped him on the top of his head, causing him to lower his head. He seemed to be unable to react for a moment. He looked up in confusion, and even the crazed expression on his face seemed to be stuck. Why are you so spoiled? She must have been led astray by Father Niu. Mas. I say, is there a hole in your brain? What are you thinking about? Shen Ying scratched her head in frustration. What substitute? There has always been only one chef, be it you in the past or now. The only thing that separates them is you, right? Do you have nothing better to do? Am I playing schizophrenia with myself? Why don't you cook more when you have time? I've never thought about who is better, the past you or the present you. If you want to compete, you should compete with others. Why do you keep tormenting yourself? Also, you can't remember the past, and you're blaming me? But if I wasn't him, you weren't. Shen Ying's eyes narrowed, her expression unhappy. Are you doubting Father Niu's vision or me? He faltered and hurriedly shook his head. No, I've never doubted Master. All right. Shen Ying suddenly reached out and touched his head, rubbing it into a bird's nest. So are you done being spoiled? I Ching was stunned. His eyes were still a little blank, but the red in his eyes faded little by little. The evil aura around him also disappeared without a trace, and he returned to his usual self, as if he had finally thought things through. Hurry up and finish it. I haven't had lunch. Shen Ying added. His eyes slowly regained their firmness, and his expression instantly improved. He cupped his fists and replied in a clear voice. Yes, Master. Oh yes, cook a few more meat dishes. Yes, Master, no problem, Master. Only then did Shen Ying stand up, turn and walk out of the range of the lightning tribulation. In the next moment, the rumbling thunder sounded again, and the lightning struck down directly on I Ching. But the lightning gradually faded from the original dark red, first to light red, and then instantly returned to white light. His mental demons are gone. Lone Moon looked at the sky, and turned to look at Shening, who was walking back. What did you talk to him about just now? Even his mental demons are gone. His bluffing skills had improved. You didn't listen? Shening tilted her head. Why are you looking at me like that? Am I that kind of person? Yes. Motherf asterisk her. The lightning tribulation in the sky became denser and denser, illuminating the surroundings with a bright white light. But it was only the lightning tribulation of nascent soul after all. Apart from the mental demon tribulation, the rest were nothing compared to the heavenly tribulations in the immortal world. Lone Moon was completely relieved. The two didn't wait long in the same place, and the lightning tribulation was over. But the last lightning tribulation seemed to be especially powerful, and even the flash was several times more than the previous dozens. When that lightning came down, even the defensive array that Lone Moon had set up shook and almost collapsed. Chef in the middle, however, didn't seem to feel anything. Apart from the injuries caused by the mental demons, there were no more injuries on his body. In the next moment, the tribulation clouds in the sky dispersed, and the surroundings began to light up. At the same time, large amounts of spirit chi swarmed over, instantly filling the whole honesty sect. Especially in Chef's direction, the spirit chi was so thick that it was almost turning into a substance. Even the wounds on his body were recovering rapidly, visible to the naked eye. He walked directly towards the two. Lone Moon didn't know if it was an illusion, but they felt that his gaze was more stable than before. He looked straight in Shen Ying's direction, and something flashed in his eyes. He said firmly, "Master, I'm back." Shen Ying was stunned for a moment, and her eyes narrowed. "Oh, I'm hungry." "Yes, master." Chef didn't say anything else, but turned and plunged into the kitchen at the side, without stopping at all. He even forgot to restrain the overflowing sword chi beside him. Speaking of which, wasn't the sword chi on his body a bit too thick? Wait. Lone Moon subconsciously looked at his cultivation. Holy shit. How did you form a soul formation? Lone Moon chased him all the way to the kitchen, and looked closely at his body. He really had soul formation cultivation. Wasn't he still forming his nascent soul when the lightning struck? How did he jump a level in the blink of an eye? I Ching looked at the ingredients in his storage bag with a relaxed expression. There's too much spirit chi. Damn, you're rising a bit too fast like this. There shouldn't be any problems, right? Is your body alright? He shook his head as he cut the vegetables. I'm fine. No, you're rising too fast. If there's really a problem, we'll send you down here for nothing. The more Lone Moon thought about it, the more worried he got. Your body has just recovered. What if there's a problem? Oh, I Ching answered casually, and pointed to his side. Father Neo, give me that plate. Lone Moon handed it over. I'll still look at it carefully for you later. It's best if Shening can also help you look at the data or something. I'll go find Shening. With that said, he turned and walked out of the kitchen. He had just walked 2 steps when his body suddenly stiffened, as if he thought of something. His eyes widened abruptly, and he turned back somewhat mechanically. What did you just call me? For all. Chapter 334. I Ching directly turned around and stuffed 2 plates of freshly cooked food into his hands. Father Neo, bring these to master first, it's already an hour late. You. Lone Moon subconsciously took the 2 plates, his eyes widening even more in shock. After a while he shouted, You remember? Holy shit. No wonder he suddenly became a soul formation, so he recovered. Yes. I Ching nodded. Then why didn't you say it just now? I thought you saw through it. Even Master saw through it. Son of AB asterisk TCH. See through your head. Do you have to be the same as Master and disciple? Are you worthy of your father's broken heart? Perhaps because of the last lightning strike, I Ching regained his memory. His cultivation naturally rose back to the divine race. But because of the limitations of his body, he did not return to his previous level. The reason why he was now a soul formation was probably because this was the lower realm, and he had not completely accepted the assistant seal. So he would be restricted by the laws of the lower realm. His cultivation would be suppressed to soul formation. Lone Moon felt that this was considered good news. It seemed like it would not be long before they could return to the immortal world. Just that. What the hell is this? Before Lone Moon could put down the 2 dishes, he saw a shadow appear beside Lazy Ying. It was emitting yin qi all over its body. It really was a ghost. Where did it come from? It came from someone else's body, Shening said casually. What body? Lone Moon stopped halfway. As if thinking of something, his expression changed. The soul of the original owner trapped in the invader's body. Shening took the dishes from his hands, picked up her chopsticks and started eating. So hungry. Lone Moon glanced at the terrified ghost shadow. On closer look, it indeed looked exactly the same as Jing Qi's current body. But it was extremely weak, transparent like a wisp of smoke that would dissipate with a blow. Why is he here? He looked confused. Wasn't he suppressed by Jing Qi, trapped in the body and unable to come out? As Shening ate, she took the time to reply, Chef's sword aura. Lone Moon paused, thinking of the competition just now. You mean Chef's sword chi directly shook him out? That can't be right. How could the sword chi be repelled? The invaders were only able to suppress it because of their luck. Wait, when they brought Chef back just now, that Jing Qi's luck seemed to be almost gone. Was it because of this, in addition to Chef's sword chi, that the other party lost the suppression of the original soul, and this soul was squeezed out? Don't tell me you knew this would happen. That's why you let Chef fight with them? Before he fought with Chef, he still had a lot of luck on him. After he fought with Chef, there wasn't much left. Even the primitive soul that was suppressed was squeezed out. Shening did not answer. Instead, while she was drinking water, she instructed, Father Nyo, after we're done eating, go and get Chef's childhood friend. What? Lone Moon glanced at her. Isn't that your new fangirl? She's a lesbian. You really want to develop her into a lesbian? He gave her an expression that said, How can you face Chef? Master, let me go. She did not know when I Ching had walked out of the kitchen and placed the dishes on the table in front of Shun Ing one by one. Then his figure flashed and disappeared. In less than a moment, he appeared in front of them with an excited girl. Big sister. Lily's eyes lit up. She jumped and was about to pounce on Shening. Chef's eyes were sharp and his hands were quick. He pulled her back again. Lily immediately glared at I Ching behind her like a fireball. I'll leave this person to you. Shening suddenly spoke. She pointed at the confused ghost beside her, who was starting to lose consciousness. Who? Lily was also shocked. It was as if she just noticed the ghost beside her. Ghost. Ghost. Big sister is so scary. Her little face paled. She turned and wanted to pounce on Shening again, but she was pulled back by the same person. I Ching used his height to grab her collar and throw her out. Little bitch. If I really let you near Master, I'm not called Chef. Carrot. Shening, what are you doing? Lone Moon looked confused too. Why are you handing him to a little girl? What if he was caught by the invaders again? Shening tilted her head. Aren't souls managed by Mengpa? Souls are managed by Mengpa, but with her. He stopped mid-sentence. Something suddenly connected in his mind. He turned and glared at the girl beside him. You're Mengpa. Lily stared blankly. What Meng? Just as she was about to ask, the look in her eyes suddenly changed. Her original innocent expression slowly turned into a look of understanding. Even the aura around her instantly changed, as if some seal had suddenly been unlocked. A moment later, he smiled regretfully at the few of them. Sect Master is indeed a manager. Even you managed to recognize it. Her figure changed, and she slowly turned from a lily back into a shorty. She said with a little disappointment, I've clearly sealed my memories. Lone Moon. It's true. Holy shit. You already knew. Lone Moon stared at Shun Ing in disbelief. Then he thought of something and looked at Chef. You knew too. That's right. Both of them nodded. Wasn't it obvious at a glance? Right my ass. He was going crazy. Why did you tell me? Did he still have teammates to love? Would it kill him to squeak? The two of them exchanged a look and said in unison. I thought you knew. What the hell do I know? It would be weird if he knew. Seeing that the person opposite was about to go berserk, Shunning suddenly looked up and said, Father Niao, have you never unlocked the assistant authority? What assistant? He faltered. Suddenly, something flashed in front of his eyes. In the next moment, everything in front of him seemed to be different, especially Lily beside him. A few words suddenly appeared above her head. Turbid remnant consciousness. All the information about her appeared in his mind. It was as if he suddenly opened a character introduction. Even the soul beside him had the word Jingqi, but the information about him was only up to the age of 10. There was nothing after that. Shit. So the manager assistant had this kind of external function. Next time you have any assistant skills, can you King let me know in advance? He glared at Shining. He was an assistant, not a nanny. Don't mind such details. Get lost. You're King lazy. Definitely. Wait. He suddenly thought of a problem. He turned to Chef. Shining was a manager. It was not strange that she recognized Meng Pe. How did you recognize her? He was not a real assistant yet. I Ching looked at him and answered seriously. Because no one can see master at first sight. Lone Moon. Meng Pe. Shining. Son of AB *Tzich. She felt like she was stabbed somewhere. Chapter 335. I Ching took a step forward with a natural expression. He raised his hand and pushed the soul that was about to become a wandering spirit towards Meng Pe. I'll leave this person to you. Oh. Meng Pe recovered and conjured a seal. The soul flashed and turned into a beam of light that flew into Meng Pe's hand. After keeping the soul, she looked at Shining with sparkling eyes. Sect Master, don't worry. I will personally send him into samsara. Shining nodded. Go. Sect Master. Meng Pe looked at her, her eyes heavy, as if she wanted to say something. Can't I stay a little longer? Before Shining could answer, I Ching took a step forward and said confidently, I didn't prepare your meal. Who said anything about staying food? Meng Pe was full of grievances. Seeing that Shining had no intention of keeping her, she could only turn and walk away. The invader's trapped soul is out. Now we just have to chase him back to the plane, right? Lone Moon looked at Shining, his expression saying, if you dare say one more thing that you think he knows, I'll deduct your food expenses. Shining nodded. Then I'll go catch that Shinibyu. While the people from Divine Heaven's sect had not left, Lone Moon stood up. As long as he chased the invader out of the plane, this matter would be resolved. He was just about to turn when suddenly a bell rang from the horizon. The bell rang louder and louder, spreading throughout the 3 azure realms in an instant. It rang 10 times. What was this? Did you hear that? He turned to look at the two. I Ching nodded, also looking confused. What was that? Before he could think, Lu Hong had already flown up hurriedly, his face pale and panicked. His steps were even more disorderly. He looked at Lone Moon anxiously and said, Supremacy, did you hear that? The bell, it's 10 bells. The bell of the Mirage Sea is ringing. What's going on? Lone Moon looked confused. What 10 bells? Speak clearly, what do you mean by 10 bells? It's the Mirage Sea Beast Tide Supremacy. His face was anxious, even his body was trembling. The bell rang 10 times just now. I think the seal on the Mirage Sea has already been broken. All the sects have already set off to stop it. Lone Moon turned around and saw a large group of people flying out of the sect, heading towards the north. The beast tide has already invaded the 3 azure world. If we don't stop it in time, the entire 3 azure world will cease to exist. I'm sure all the elite disciples of the various sects have already rushed over. Lu Hong said anxiously. I want to ask Venerable One if all of our sect members should set off to the Mirage Sea to stop the beast tide. Beast tide? Since when did such a powerful beast tide appear in the 3 azure realms that required all the sects to work together to defend against it? Call up all the disciples who have already reached Foundation establishment and set out together. The rest of you stay in the sect. Lone Moon instructed in a low voice. If it really was a beast tide, Chi refinement disciples would also be cannon fodder. All right. Lu Hong nodded and turned to gather the disciples. Let's go, Chef Shining. Lone Moon called out. Oh. Lone Moon had just taken a step when he turned back and pulled a certain foodie up by force, shoving her to his personal driver chef, before flying towards the main hall of the main peak. Lu Hong's speed was very fast. It was also possible that everyone had heard the bell. When they arrived, all the disciples of the sect above the foundation establishment stage were already in front of the main hall square. Seeing that they had passed, Lu Hong did not say much and shouted for them to set off. With a wave of his hand, he led everyone towards the north. Along the way, Lone Moon asked about the situation of the beast tide. It turned out that every 100 years in the 3 Azure realms, a beast tide would be triggered above the Mirage Sea in the far north. The beasts in the Mirage Sea would take the opportunity to go ashore and attack the people of the 3 Azure realms. Moreover, there were many beasts from the Mirage Sea. Every time, tens of thousands of beasts would attack, and most of them were around the 7th level, and some were even above the 10th level. In the past, there was an ancient array left behind at the border of the Mirage Sea. This array formed a barrier and directly blocked the beasts outside. In the past, all the sects gathered at the Mirage Sea, saying that it was to repel the beast tide. But in reality, it was just to exterminate some of the escaped beasts that rushed into the barrier. In the past few hundred years, the power of the ancient array has become weaker and weaker. Often, there would be a beast tide attack before the 100-year period ends. The number of beasts that rushed in also increased. Lu Hong sighed as he flew. This time, the bell suddenly rang. It seems that the ancient array could not hold on any longer, and the beast tide rushed in. I don't know if the 3 Azure realms can survive this. His face was full of worry. Even the disciples behind him had the same expression, but no one retreated. They rushed towards the north desperately, as if they knew that there was no other way. Lone Moon frowned. He had an impression of the Mirage Sea. He remembered that the E family of the 4 big families guarded the border of the Mirage Sea. At that time, Baizé guarded the E family to prevent those beasts from climbing ashore. And the black dragon in the divine world, when it was still a green dragon, led the beast tide to fight against Baizé once. Afterwards, Shening forced it to acknowledge the E family as its master, and it guarded the Mirage Sea for many years. After that, the black dragon ascended to become a dragon. Who would have thought that after so many years, the beasts in the Mirage Sea had become so rampant? Lone Moon vaguely felt that something was wrong, but he could not pinpoint it. We're here. Lu Hong suddenly stopped. Indeed, they could already see the disciples of various sects fighting with the beasts below. They were all in groups of 3 to 5, fighting 1 or 2 beasts. They all looked to be at the 4th or 5th level. Foundation establishment disciples, go down and help. Golden Core disciples, follow me and continue forward. Lu Hong gave a very familiar command and continued flying forward. The further they flew, the more beasts there were on the ground, and the more cultivators there were. There were also cultivators who rushed over at the last minute. There were figures of cultivators fighting with the beasts everywhere. Some were dressed in the uniforms of various sects. Some were probably itinerant cultivators. And what was more surprising was that there was a person with a faint evil aura around him. That is a fiendish cultivator? Lone Moon was shocked, and somewhat did not dare to believe his eyes. That is a disciple of the Hidden Fiend sect. Lu Hong took a moment to look at that Golden Core fiendish cultivator, and while commanding the Golden Core disciples to stop here to deal with the obviously many times more beasts than before, he answered with a natural expression. Fiendish cultivators will also come to deal with the beast tide? Lone Moon subconsciously blurted out. Aren't you afraid that he has a guilty conscience and has other supremacy, Lone Moon? Lu Hong suddenly opened his mouth, and for the first time, retorted with disapproval and disbelief. You can't say that. Ha! Fiendish cultivators and our immortal sects only have different cultivation methods. We are all the same cultivators. Naturally, there is no difference between us, he said with a serious expression. Moreover, now that we are facing a great enemy, we should be united. Was the relationship between immortal sects and fiendish cultivators so harmonious now? Supremacy, please do not say such things. They are all good and proper fiendish cultivators. Chapter 336. Lone Moon frowned. The world was changing so fast. Fiendish cultivators were already trustworthy companions. Somehow, he thought of roasted chicken gal. Sigh. Indeed, there was nothing that time couldn't change. It's my fault. He apologized hurriedly. Looking at the beasts that were getting denser and denser, he said to the two nascent soul cultivators who were left in the sky, "You two stay here to stop the beast tide. We'll go ahead and take a look." All right. Lu Hong nodded. He also understood that if they continued forward, those beasts wouldn't be something they could handle. He turned to look at I Ching, who had just ascended to nascent soul. Then he's with us. Lone Moon said, "Don't worry. He can definitely handle it." Lu Hong was stunned, but he did not ask further. He cupped his fists and said with a resolute expression, "Please take care of yourselves, supremacies." With that said, he looked at the two of them again, and then flew down towards the herd of beasts below. Lone Moon and the other two then continued flying forward. But the further they flew, the more shocked they were by the scene in front of them. There were dense beasts everywhere in front of them. The number was like a tide that kept coming. They could only see a black mass. He had never seen so many demon beasts before. How can there be so many demon beasts? And their cultivation levels weren't low. He could already faintly hear the sound of fighting in front of him. He scanned with his divine perception, and found that they were all soul formation cultivators. There were dozens of them in total. They blocked the front, and focused on attacking the high-level demon beasts, to avoid hurting the disciples behind them. It seemed that this beast tide had indeed invaded many times. All the sects didn't even need to discuss to know where they should fight. Lone Moon turned his hand, and the flute instantly turned into a spirit sword. He gave Shun Ing and Chef a look, and directly flew towards the dozen soul formation cultivators in front of them. Those people looked quite familiar. They were the disciples who went to Honesty's sect to participate in the competition. They should have rushed over the moment they heard the bell. Lone Moon instantly turned into a rain of swords, attacking the few 12th-level demon beasts in front of them. He was originally an emperor. Even if he suppressed his cultivation, the demon beasts of the lower realm naturally couldn't stop the spirit swords that he turned into. The swords pierced through their bodies, and the demon beasts immediately fell to the ground. Supremacy Lone Moon. Dong Wu, who was about to battle ahead, was delighted. "You're here." Lone Moon nodded in greeting, and rushed over with Chef. In an instant, the few of them who were still having a hard time felt much more relaxed. The demon beasts also fell in droves, and sharp sword chi was everywhere. All the soul formation cultivators were stunned. They could only sigh. Sword cultivators were indeed different. One of them was more than a few of them. But why did the cultivator with the frightening sword chi beside Supremacy Lone Moon look a little like the one who fought with Divine Heaven's sect for the top position of Golden Core? They didn't have time to think about it before they threw themselves back into the battle. With the addition of these two people, they managed to push back the oncoming beast horde by a certain distance, pushing them back. However, there were simply too many beasts. When the beasts retreated to the seaside, they did not retreat anymore. Instead, more and more beasts emerged from the sea. There was no end to it. The more Lone Moon fought, the stranger he felt. This scene was not right. Normally, it had always been difficult for beasts to advance, and they weren't like the demon race, who had developed intelligence first. So their numbers had always been small, and they rarely moved in groups. Yet the three Azure realms would welcome a beast tide every 100 years. How could this not be right? He observed the surroundings, but found that there were 4 very prominent pillars standing by the seaside. 2 of them were already broken, and there were faint strange patterns drawn on them. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but the beasts seemed to be avoiding those pillars intentionally or unintentionally. "What's that?" he asked Dong Wu beside him. "It's the foundation of the ancient array that blocked the beast tide in the past." Dong Wu sighed and replied, "Unfortunately, it has been broken by the beast tide now." "What array is it? Perhaps that array could be repaired." "I don't know." Dong Wu shook his head and split a demon beast with a sword. "This array has long been lost. In the last 1,000,000 years, I've never heard of anyone who is proficient in this array." Lone Moon's eyes darkened. "I'll go take a look." With that said, He turned to look at the person behind him and called out, "Chef." In the next moment, the sword in I Ching's hand changed. All the sword chi in his body condensed into sword intent, turning into a long sword chi dragon that swept in front of Lone Moon. There was only a dragon's roar, and instantly a path to the array pillar was swept out. Lone Moon flew over directly and took a closer look at the talisman engraved on the pillar, but found that he didn't understand it at all. What's this? He was just about to open up the authority to see if there was an automatic explanation or something. But I Ching suddenly said, "It's the dragon trapping array." "What? This is the dragon trapping array of the dragon race," I Ching said with certainty. "There's such an array in the inheritance of the dragon race. So it was the array of the divine race. Wait, this array, could it be left behind after that long worm turned into a dragon? Can you set up this array?" Lone Moon asked anxiously. Yes. I Ching turned to look at the densely packed sea of beasts that kept surging ashore. "This array cannot be interrupted in the middle of setting up now?" "That's easy." Lone Moon's eyes lit up, as long as it could be repaired. "Just set up the array." With that said, he flashed back in front of the people behind, looked up at the right, and said, "Hey, Shining, hurry down and help Chef clear the area." "Huh?" Shining, who was sitting on the tree and swinging her legs, tilted her head looking lazy. The soul formation cultivators at the side got a fright. "Huh?" Not to mention that there was actually a whole tree here that hadn't been attacked by the beast horde. Who was that person on the tree? When did she come? Why didn't they see her at all? And they subconsciously narrowed their eyes at the fruit cores that were already strewn all over the ground under the tree. How long exactly did this person eat fruits on the tree? "Stop being so long-winded, hurry down." Only then did Shunning shake her legs, jump down from the tree, and walk over slowly. So troublesome. She didn't want to move until she was full. "Troublesome my ass, hurry up." Lone Moon hurriedly went forward and dragged her over, while at the same time stuffed the sword in his hand in her hand. "All right, hurry up. I know you're not full. You can have an extra meal for dinner, right?" With that said, he conveniently pushed her towards the densely packed beast horde. "Supremacy Lone Moon, you." All the soul formation cultivators were shocked. That girl didn't look like she had any cultivation. Wasn't he sending her to her death? A few people just wanted to go forward to stop her, but it was already too late. They watched as huge demon beasts climbed up from the sea, opened their mouths and bit towards her. Dongwu even exclaimed out loud, "Miss Little." Before she finished speaking, she heard the other party sigh, suddenly raised the hand that was holding the sword, and as if playing, waved it in front of her. In an instant, the side of the sword turned into a white line, with an aura that seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth. With a swoosh, it swept towards the sea. In the blink of an eye, the originally densely packed beast horde on the sea surface were all cut in half. Even the huge waves that were raised by the demon beasts on the sea surface also mixed with the beast water and fell down, instantly dyeing the sea surface red. There was a complete silence. Dongwu. Everyone. Where were they? What just happened? Chapter 337. I'm so tired. Shening turned and handed the sword to Father Nyo, her shoulders slumped, her face full of sadness. I know. Lone Moon took the sword, turned and took down the storage bag beside him. I just packed it for you. Go back to your tree to eat. Shen Ying's eyes lit up. Yes, Father Nyo. No problem, Father Nyo. Instantly, she was full of energy, took the bag from him, turned and walked back to that tree. In front of the dozen soul formation supremacies beside her, she hugged the tree trunk and started to climb the tree. Perhaps because she had no experience in climbing trees, she just climbed for a while before slipping down again. She thought of something and decided not to climb at all. Sitting directly under the tree, took out delicious dishes from the bag, and placed them all on the ground. Then she took the bowl and started to eat crazily. Along the way, he even took the time to glance at the soul formation cultivators, who had yet to come back to their senses. She picked up a small piece of pastry beside her and said, "Want some?" Everyone stiffened and shook their heads. "Oh," she answered and continued to eat her food. Everyone. Yet Lone Moon on the other side seemed to be long used to it. He turned and shouted at I Ching beside the pillar. Chef, enough. You can start. Ha! All the soul formation cultivators were stunned. Start? Start what? Before they had time to think carefully, in the next moment, a golden array suddenly appeared on the ground, like a carpet, instantly sweeping across the entire coast. One by one golden talisman that they had never seen before lit up. In the next moment, those talismans slowly gathered. In a short while, they formed the shape of 16 light pillars. The ground shook. With a rumbling sound, the 16 pillars rose from the ground and merged with the light pillars. After a quarter of an hour, with a loud dragon roar, a transparent barrier appeared between the 16 newly appeared pillars, rising straight to the sky, directly isolating the entire mirage sea outside. This is Dongwu, and all the soul formation cultivators had a look of disbelief. The array was repaired. No, more accurately, it was a new array that was exactly the same. Lone Moon glanced at the 16 array pillars. He could not help but look at Chef, who had already walked back. Weren't there only 4 before? How did it become 16? The dragon trapping array has 16 array foundations to begin with, I Ching replied. The previous array was not complete. Lone Moon nodded. That's right. In any case, it was an array formation of the god race. Even after so many years, how could it be broken by the demonic beasts of the lower beast realm? It was normal for it to be incomplete. Speaking of which, the black dragon was not ranked highly in the dragon clan. Naturally, it could not compare to I Ching, who was a mixed blood dragon and phoenix. Sure enough, cheats were different. Supremacy. Lone Moon. The group of soul formation cultivators finally reacted and walked over quickly, their faces filled with excitement. I wonder how this supremacy is proficient in this illusory sea ancient array? Lone Moon paused and then remembered about I Ching. Before they set off, I Ching suppressed his cultivation to nascent soul. So Lu Hong did not realize that he was already a soul formation cultivator. However, he had just repelled the horde of beasts and set up the formation. Naturally, he could not hide his soul formation cultivation. That's I Ching from the previous competition. Actually, he was originally a soul formation cultivator. It's just that he was seriously injured a few years ago. His meridians were damaged, so his cultivation did not recover. Now that his injuries have healed, he naturally returned to his original cultivation. He deliberately lied about the history of the other party being raised, since he was not a member of Honesty sect anyway. Only then did everyone's faces change. On the other side, I Ching directly walked past them and toward Shining. Looking at the person on the ground, he frowned. Master, the ground is too cold, you can't sit for long. With that said, he took out a small round table and 4 chairs. He pulled the person to the chair and carefully placed the unfinished dishes on the ground one by one onto the table. He even added a few more dishes. Lone Moon. Everyone. Are you guys here for a picnic? Cough that. Lone Moon coughed, the corner of his mouth twitching. He tried his best to ignore the master and disciple, and turned to remind them. Although the array formation has been set up again, there are still some demonic beasts that have barged in. Let's go back and help. Only then did everyone realize. Yes, there are still demonic beasts. I Ching, and I will wait for Shining to finish eating and come over to help. Everyone subconsciously trembled. Suddenly, they thought of the sword that destroyed the entire group of beasts. Their hearts went numb, and they all smiled and nodded. Yes, of course. So they all mounted their swords and flew back to help. As they flew, they couldn't help but turn back to look at Shining, who was still having a picnic, and I Ching, who was busy handing out dishes. Not to mention I Ching, who knew the ancient array. Who was that woman? She clearly didn't look like an ordinary person with no spirit chi. Why did she have such terrifying strength? That sword seemed to be able to split open the sky. Oh yes, what was that woman's name again? This time, Lone Moon waited until Shining had finished her meal and burped loudly before he spoke. You guys can see that there's something wrong with this beast tide, right? I Ching frowned and poured another cup of tea for Shining. He nodded and said, Indeed, ordinary demonic beasts won't attack people easily unless they are disturbed. And so many of them. Yes, the numbers are strange, Lomun said in a low voice. Although the aquatic demonic beasts reproduce faster than ordinary demonic beasts. But that beast tied just now, so many demonic beasts, it's simply unimaginable. No matter how big this Mirage Sea is, it's impossible to raise so many demonic beasts without hundreds of thousands of years. But Lu Hong said that such a beast tide happens once every 100 years. And it seemed to have indirectly promoted the friendly relations between fiendish cultivators and immortal sections. That's right. I Ching nodded and looked at Shening. Master, this beast tide is indeed abnormal. And among the beasts earlier, there were many demonic beasts above the 10th level. By right, demonic beasts above the 10th level can transform and develop spiritual intelligence. But without exception, they all maintain their beast forms and attack based on instinct, unless they don't have spiritual intelligence at all. Lomun finished. That's right. I Ching nodded. Demonic beasts that already had spiritual intelligence, no matter how low it was, would always be able to avoid danger. But that group of demonic beasts, even though they knew that it was a soul formation cultivator who came to stop them, did not have any intention of retreating at all. Anyway, they swarmed over like bees. Even after he and I Ching attacked, those demonic beasts did not seem to realize the danger at all. They did not show any signs of fear. Shening, what do you think? Lomun turned to look at Shening. I don't know. Shening shook her head. Perhaps the Mirage Sea had a birth control policy. Speaking of which, along the way, did anyone see that Chinibyu? Lomun. I Ching. Chapter 338. Only then did the two remember the invader called Jingqi. Thinking about it carefully, they did not see him along the way. Especially among the Golden Core disciples who were fighting against the demon beasts along the way. There were disciples from various sects who went to participate in the competition, but there was no sign of him. Divine Heaven's sect would not let him stay alone. Lomun's heart sank, and without hesitation, he directly made a tracing spell. He had left it on him a long time ago, just to make it easier to find him. But strangely, his tracing spell did not respond. How could this be? His expression changed. Where did he go? It should be. Shening suddenly turned and pointed in the direction of the Mirage Sea. Over there. Mirage Sea. Lomun and I Ching exchanged a look, and their hearts sank. Could it be that this beast tide is related to him? Previously, they were worried about the outbreak of Chef Sword Chi, and did not care about what happened to that Chinibyu after the competition. Unexpectedly, after only one day, he caused such a big thing. With his ability, it is impossible to cause such a big beast tide. I Ching shook his head and said, there should be other reasons. Let's go and see, Shening suggested. Only then did the two rise up on their swords and flew towards the depths of the Mirage Sea. Large pieces of half-beast corpses floated on the surface of the sea. Shen Ying's sword strike might have been too fierce. The three of them flew for a long time before they finally did not see those corpses. But below them appeared a large number of demon beasts. And the number was even more than before, rushing in the direction they came from in groups. Even as if they could not see the floating corpses in the sea at all. They just rushed over blindly, as if controlled by something. This was too strange. I'll go catch one and see, Lomun said and flew down. He raised his hand and set up a trapping array, which turned into a net of spirit chi, and caught an 8th-level demon beast, and lifted it up. The few of them stopped on a small island at the side, and then threw this demon beast on the ground. The demon beast seemed to have gone mad, desperately hitting the trapping array around it. Even when it was covered in blood, it did not stop, and its eyes were emitting a strange red light. Lomun frowned and struck out with the sword art. The demon fell to the ground instantly. He directly used a wind blade to cut open the belly of this rank 8 beast, and carefully scanned it. He even used his divine sense to explore. Suddenly his eyes widened. This demonic beast actually doesn't have a beast core. How is this possible? Normally, if a demonic beast wanted to cultivate, it would definitely form a beast core in its body. Otherwise, it would be impossible for it to gather spiritual energy. This was clearly an 8th-ranked demonic beast, so it was impossible for it to not have a beast core. Father Nyo, why don't we try summoning the soul? I Ching suggested. Lo Moon paused. He immediately used a soul summoning spell. A beam of light shot out from his finger and swept towards the other party. A moment later, a wisp of light smoke floated up from the beast's corpse and dissipated in a short while. It didn't even condense into a shape. This is a remnant soul, Lo Moon exclaimed. I Ching's eyes were filled with shock as well. There was absolutely no problem with Lo Moon's sorcery, which meant that the light smoke just now was the soul of this demonic beast. There was actually only a remnant soul in the body of an 8th-level demonic beast. No, it probably couldn't even be called a remnant soul. No wonder these demonic beasts only rushed towards the shore blindly. They probably didn't have any consciousness at all. They probably didn't even have souls in their bodies. Where did their souls go? Who took them away? Logically speaking, if someone had used soul summoning, it was impossible that they didn't find out. Even Mengpa didn't notice it. Perhaps there wasn't any in the beginning. Shen Ying's eyes darkened. No. Lo Moon paused. But this demonic beast was clearly alive. Why wasn't there any in the beginning? Over there. Shen Ying tilted her head and suddenly pointed to the right side of the sea. There's something interesting. What? Something that doesn't belong to this world. Could there be another intruder? Lo Moon and I Ching exchanged a look, and their expressions changed. Let's go and take a look. Once again, they mounted their swords and flew in the direction that Shen Ying had pointed out. The closer they got, the more demonic beasts there were. The sea was filled with all kinds of demonic beasts, and their levels were getting higher and higher. Some of them even had the cultivation of earth immortals, but they still maintained the appearance of not taking human form and crazily headed in the direction that they came from. They were almost at the edge of the Mirage Sea. After flying for another 10 minutes, they could faintly see a black island. Looking at the scene on the island, the few of them couldn't help but gasp. There were even more demonic beasts on the island. There were layers and layers of them, and they were crawling towards the sea outside. Compared to the demonic beasts in the sea, these demonic beasts seemed even crazier. But their bodies were all blood red. Many of the scales on their bodies were still wrinkled, as if they had just been born and hadn't fully grown. But once they crawled into the water, they became adult demonic beasts again. It was as if every step they crawled took hundreds of years of growth. The slower they crawled, the higher the level of the demonic beasts when they entered the water. What island is this? Lo Moon suddenly had a bad feeling. He had never seen such a scene before. There's something in the middle of the island, Shen Ying reminded. Lo Moon and I Ching were stunned. The next moment, they directly flew towards the center of the island. From afar, the few of them saw a silver light. They saw that in the middle of the island, there was a pool of 2 to 3 meters wide. The water in the pool was very strange. It was silvery white, like a pool of mercury. And those endless demonic beasts crawled out of the pool. At first they were very small, but when they reached the shore, they grew with the wind. What is this thing? I Ching was stunned. He released his divine perception to feel carefully, only to find that there was actually no fluctuation of spirit chi in the pool. Apart from the different color, it was just like ordinary pool water. But it could produce so many demonic beasts. This was practically a miracle. Lo Moon sensed the assistant imprint, wanting to see the situation of this pool clearly. After a while his eyes suddenly widened. This pool doesn't belong to this plane. He saw that the word invader suddenly appeared on the pool. How can this be? Lo Moon was stunned. Why is there no alarm this time when this plane is invaded? There was obviously a second greater from before. Maybe it's been here for too long. Shen Ying said. You're saying that this thing was here before you became a manager? Yes. Lo Moon frowned. It was indeed possible. This was not the first time this beast tide had happened. Even when they were still in the lower realm, this Mirage Sea was not very safe. It was only because Baizé was guarding that it did not form a beast tide. In other words, it was very likely that this pool was already here at that time. No matter what, we cannot let this pool continue like this. I Ching directly summoned his spirit sword and said. Yes. Lo Moon nodded. If this goes on, this beast tide will not end. that you're tuning in to the Lee May's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.